Hey everybody, Spencer Presley here, and I am currently sitting down with Tyler Hogle from Screaming Villains.
What up?
So Tyler, if people don't know who you are or what you do, what is the quick Twitter size sales pitch for who you are and what your company Screaming Villains is?
Um, I'm mainly responsible for, I guess, the resurrection of Night Trap, which is what everyone knows me as. So we'll go with that.
So would you say in the echelon of like Night Trap people who are like famous, it's like Tom Zito, uh, and then maybe somewhere in the middle you or like a bunch of like people who tried to start the SRB kind of like tied for second and third place.
I wouldn't give myself that much credit.
Well, it's funny because I
Yeah.
feel like if it wasn't for the 25th anniversary edition that you released in 2017 now, which feels like it was forever ago,
Mhm.
um, I probably would have been like many other people out there who my knowledge of Night Trap up until then was okay. Angry video game nerd made fun of it once. That's the whole premise.
Right. It seemed like, because like up until the game was released, or actually before it was even announced, I was always Googling stuff about it. And I kind of learned that the only experience that most people had with it was, like you said, angry video game nerd, um, game grumps, and then a lot of bad YouTube playthroughs, and that's about it.
Hmm. So this is the weird thing for me of my history. I've actually known about Night Trap even before the 25th anniversary edition, but I'd say really it's only big kind of. It had its big release date, the court drama thing that we kind of joked about. Skip ahead through a whole bunch of ports. I'm trying to remember the exact date. Do you remember when that first Kickstarter for the actual like HD Night Trap was? Was that like 2014, 15?
I think it was 15.
Yeah, so like I have absolutely no idea besides whatever entity Digital Pictures is now. Did you have any involvement in that at all, or was that totally separate from you?
Nah, that's totally separate. I didn't get involved until I want to say summer of 2016 was when I got involved. So the Kickstarter had been going for about at least a year at that point, and I wasn't involved before that.
And you mainly got involved with your work bringing a bunch of old Digital Picture stuff onto iOS, right?
Sort of. Like the way I got involved with Night Trap specifically was it kind of started out as a joke that was funny between me and one other person, and that was it. And what happened was is the Kickstarter happened, and then it failed miserably. And then there was a very brief period where some fans started making their own fan made versions of Night Trap. I think there was like two or three of them. And then some gaming websites were writing articles about them, and I thought that was kind of funny. And then a friend of mine suggested the idea of making a working version of Night Trap on a phone. He was like, you should make a working version of Night Trap that's playable on a cell phone, upload it to YouTube anonymously, and gaming websites into picking it up, thinking it's an official thing. And because I have too much time on my hands, I'm like, that's an awesome idea. Let's do it. So I made a working prototype of it in like one weekend. And then I had my at the time my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I had her just film me playing it on a cell phone. And then we uploaded it to YouTube anonymously. And then I created an email account and just attached that to the description. That was it. And then just named it nighttrapprototype.avi as kind of like a throwback days to LimeWire to make it look like it seems like it's something official that leaked. And then about a day later, I got in contact with Tom Zito, and then next thing I know, I'm making an official version of Night Trap. So it was a
So
pretty quick process.
yeah, I was gonna say I actually just pulled up your I guess the only two that actually ever made it into the public like at least in terms of like iOS store was um, Double Switch and Quarterback Attack.
Oh, those are terrible.
Well, as much as you say those are terrible, those are like that was my only way to actually ever play like Double Switch with like semi
Yeah.
decent quality until the PS4 one came out.
Yeah, the problem with those games is Like, it wasn't like a Night Trap situation to where the game was licensed to me and then I can do whatever I want and, spend as much time as I want making them. With Double Switch and Quarterback Attack, they're owned by a different person. So when I got brought on board to do those games, it was a work for hire situation, but I was only given 4 weeks to do each one. So it was basically just crank those out as quickly as possible. So they're not, I wouldn't say they're good representations of those games. And I wouldn't say they're as accurate to the originals compared to like the PlayStation and the Steam versions of the newer ones. So yeah, those are probably bad examples. I'm not really a fan of those two.
Have you ever like thought of pulling them? Because I know the demos you can still download them now, or is it just kind of one of those things of like it probably doesn't get much attention, at least that I'm aware of, unless you're actively seeking it out.
Yeah, it doesn't get much attention, and I don't have the option of taking those down because, like I said, it was a work for hire situation to where I got hired for a month to make one game. Then a few months later, I got paid for a month to build the other game, so they were released by another company. So I don't even
Okay,
have
that
anything
that
to do with
that
those
makes
now.
sense because I knew it originally started with your um, iOS port of Night Trap, and I was always so confused how that port actually never happened after all these years. So that makes more sense now.
Yeah, there is a mobile version of Night Trap, but I just still haven't released it yet because that was originally Night Trap was going to be a mobile game, and then once it was finished, I was like, this is stupid. This is Night Trap. I should be able to easily get this on consoles. So I applied to Sony and Microsoft and got approved. And then I was all like, well, forget mobile. Let's put these on consoles. So it's been sitting there ever since. But they do exist. They just haven't been released.
Okay, so kind of going back to the Night Trap Kickstarter, what was
Mm.
your initial thoughts on it if you really followed it at the time? Because it actually wasn't the version that you've put out with the 25th anniversary edition. I think wasn't the plan originally to go back and actually restore the original tapes of it and not just the digital versions that are, I guess, what in the 25th anniversary?
No, because that was actually one of the problems with the Kickstarter was that there was a lot of confusion because I think they had a different person write up the Kickstarter, and what that person was putting on there were kind of conflicted with what was actually possible. Because like to get a proper HD version of Night Trap, we need the actual film, and it's gone. Nobody knows where it is. So the plan was at that time was they were going to take the footage, which is what I ended up eventually getting, and they were just going to have it cleaned up and then release it that way. So it wasn't going to be like a true HD version, I guess you could say. Like the video that I got, that's the highest quality that exists.
And honestly, it's kind of funny because I feel like if a good example is my girlfriend, she's like probably 4 or 5 years younger than me, like early 20s, had no idea what an FMV game ever was before. And I remember when I
Right.
would show her Night Trap for the first time, I showed her with the like updated footage, and she's like, "Oh
Right.
wow, it's like pretty bad looking." But then if like I go back and we'll pull up the old Sega CD version for it, like it's like when you compare the two, like it is so drastically like more better, which is kind of funny because the original looks like it's presented in widescreen, even though it doesn't fill up the whole scene. But when you realize how much picture is actually missing and like all of like, because I'm trying to remember, the original one on Sega CD was 10 or 12 frames per second, probably right, and now the updated one's 24.
Yeah, the Sega CD was 12, and then Sega CD and 3DO, 3DO, they were at 12 frames per second, and then 32X was at 15.
Yeah, the 3 frames really made a difference on that 32X version.
Yeah, like it made a slight difference, but not enough to where you can immediately notice it. But it didn't look as good as the 3DO one because that's up until that point, the 3DO one had the best looking picture quality, but it also had a lower frame rate compared to 32X. But
Yeah,
like you said, 3 frames really doesn't make that big of a difference.
it's so funny though because honestly, I feel like most ports, especially back in the day, your kind of mileage was going to vary in terms of is this basically going to be a different game? How's this really going to work? For FMV games, it was really weird in terms of they were always trying to improve, but you could still tell they were so limited in what they actually could. So it was like, okay, let's try and make the user interface a lot more enjoyable. I think with stuff like Night Trap, it was a lot more subtle, but I actually recently beat Corpse Killer for the first time and went back and looked at all the old versions. All the old versions is so interesting, and just even ranging from what did it look like when you were shooting, and like some versions had bullets, some versions just had blood, some versions had nothing. It was really weird.
Right, yeah. I think like what a lot of people don't realize is that Night Trap it started out as a game for VHS. Like there was a console that was going to connect to a VCR player, and the game would be run off a VHS tape. So it was originally intended to have higher video quality. And then what's odd is that 5 years later, they could finally release it on Sega CD, and it has worse picture quality than what was originally intended, just because of hardware limitations.
So I guess obviously this all kind of came together really quickly based off an idea you had for the iOS port. Do you have a personal kind of history with these games? Because I know you're like a pretty avid fan just from all the times I've heard you talk about them, but what was like your first like FMV game that you kind of remember, or like any memories that might stand out for you?
The first ones I played was Night Trap and Marky Mark Make My Video.
I'm still sad, by the way, that unfortunately that YouTube I think it actually got taken down, the old like PS4 test one, right? I think that got taken down.
Yeah, it did.
Oh my god. When that got put up, I was like, if this game can happen, that was my ultimate, like, that would be the best April Fool's limited run game ever. And unfortunately, I feel like limited run has always been like, we're gonna make the best meme game ever for like, because there's so many like dumb game ideas and projects or stuff you could put out for April Fool's, but I think like the logistics always get in the way of it happening. And like my dream scenario was there's gonna be this like amazing collector's edition from Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch that'll have like a picture of his ab for the manual or whatever, and then it's like people are gonna put that disc in and be like, oh wait, this was the game, and they'll be like, yes, that was the whole game.
Yeah, that started out as a joke too, because like I remember when that happened. What happened at that time? There was an article that Destructoid wrote where it said it mentioned me and Josh from Limited Run. Actually, no, it didn't even mention Josh. It was about me bringing Night Trap to Nintendo, and basically I responded to someone on Twitter where someone asked if Night Trap was coming to Nintendo. Then I said, no, it's not. They're not interested. Then another person got on there and said Nintendo's a bunch of dicks. Well, Destructoid wrote an article saying Night Trap developer confirms it's not coming to Nintendo, and a Limited Run employee calls Nintendo a bunch of dicks, which that isn't what happened. It wasn't even a Limited Run employee. It was just some random guy on Twitter didn't know who it was.
I remember that exact article you're talking about, man.
Right. So that happened, and then I was like, me and Josh was bitching over Twitter one day about how, I think it was mainly me, mostly complaining about how every time I would post a tweet, it would get turned into a news article. So then one day, I can't remember what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to make a working prototype of Marky Mark Make My Video. So just for the hell of it. And then I made one in like 4 hours, and then hit up Josh the next day. And I was all like, hey, you want to like mess with the gaming press? And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, check this out. I sent him the video, and he started laughing. And I was all like, what if we post that on Twitter and announce that as the next game, even though it's not going to be? And he's like, dude, let's do it. So we tweeted it out, and then it got taken down like immediately.
That's so funny, because actually my earliest history with FMV games, and besides like offhanded like YouTube stuff like you were kind of mentioning, and I don't know if this is either going to date me or go over like everybody's head, were you ever much of an avid reader of oneup.com back in the day?
Of what was it?
OneUp.com, like, so the EGM, like, basically, like, web component of Electronic Gaming Monthly.
I remember it, yeah.
So they had a bunch of original programming on there. Like they were pretty much always known for like the One Up show, done by the now Area 5 TV guys. But they had a show I remember with Sean Baby and Shane Bittenhausen was on most of them, where they would look at really really terrible games and a lot of old like Sega CD 3DO games and like a lot of those FMV games. That's how I would discover them. And one of the episodes I always remember is Marky Mark's like Make My Video. Because I'd always seen those games, but I was like, well, I'm sure there's an actual game behind it. It can't just be like the world's worst like Windows Movie Maker game. But no, it is.
Yeah, the problem with those games, like this is like Make My Video probably suffers the most from this. Is like the Make My Video series is kind of like a product of bad marketing. Because the way those games were basically designed to be like an introduction to video editing for kids, but it wasn't marketed that way.
I feel like actually nowadays that would almost be like a multimedia like promotional thing, except obviously you had to buy it back then. But like like in terms of the product, like it's doing what it's saying. It's only just laughable the fact that you probably had to pay $50 or more for a copy of that back in the day.
Right, exactly.
So I guess kind of moving forward onto it, I don't know like what your kind of reception was to it, but I feel like when the Night Trap Kickstarter kind of failed, it was like, okay, going back to what you were saying with the miscommunication, I think there was still that lingering feeling of, man, it sucks that it didn't hit its goal, but it'd be really great if someone could do it. So like, kind of skipping ahead a little, is there ever like a part in your head considering that it was basically a one-man team? Like obviously people like helped you like getting the assets and other aspects of it, but in terms of like coding and getting that game on PC and PS4, that was basically all you, right?
Yeah, it was all me. Like pretty much everything behind the game was all me. The only thing I didn't do was I didn't film it, obviously. They had the tapes and they just converted them to digital format, and then they mailed me a hard drive with all the video footage. And other than that, the rest of it was all me.
So was that ever like kind of weird? Like, do you ever think about like, wow, so like, because they were gonna, I think the original goal was like maybe like 100,000 or more. Like I remember it was like pretty up there, and
it was
like
300,000.
Yeah, like, do you? I mean, I'm obviously you probably can't like disclose whatever the budget was for 25th anniversary edition, but like I'm assuming it's probably a lot less than 300,000. Do you ever have that moment of like, huh? I was able to just do all this, whereas they were gonna have this big Kickstarter for it, and you just kind of made it happen over like the course of 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, but at the same time, I get it. Like Night Trap, like the new one, it was probably made on a budget of around $10,000. And I only say that because when Night Trap came up, I had to quit my job. So this is actually where Quarterback Attack came in. Quarterback and Night Trap happened at the same time. So I got hired to do Quarterback Attack, which I did not want to do because I'm not a fan. I'm not a sports guy at all. I don't follow it. I don't get it. So
you're in welcome company here. I live in Kansas, and escaping football talk is basically impossible right now for me.
Right. So like basically I did Quarterback Attack just so I can make some quick money to work on Night Trap. So once I did Quarterback Attack, I had to quit my job to work Night Trap, to do Night Trap full time. And then I lived off of 10 grand for like 6 months while I was working on it. And looking back, I don't know how in the hell I did that. But yeah, that's partly what happened with that. And then with the Kickstarter having a $300,000 goal, trying to remember exactly. To my understanding, the reason why they had to raise that much money was because the studio that they had in mind to develop that version of the game, they wanted a percentage of sales up front for development costs.
Okay.
So that's why it was so high.
I can't even imagine who would develop it, because honestly, in terms of like prominent FMV developers, it's like you and I always forget their name, but like the people who did like Late Shift and like Shape-Shifting Detective, like some like studio out there. There's like 2 or 3 studios that I actually know still do FMV these days. So it's so crazy to think that like It was like, but I can understand where the developer's kind of coming from for that. So
Yeah, it's just a market that pretty much didn't exist anymore. So I
Well,
get
even and if
why
it
they
did,
want.
it was PC only and like super obscure PC. Like, let
Right,
alone, I
because
don't
it's
even
like,
think anyone was going to bring that Kickstarter version to consoles unless they probably hit some crazy stretch goals.
right, like FMV, it's like a very specific market and it's limited at the same time. So yeah, I totally get why they would want money up front, just because they don't know what's going to happen with it, because they're basically bringing back a game that's already universally hated, and there's not really much of a market for that genre of games to begin with.
Okay, so let's say it's when would you say officially you finish Quarterback Attack? You're like Night Trap, like officially you're starting the 25th anniversary like in mind. Like where are you at like in terms of like time and place?
Mm, like, when did I start it?
Yeah, like would you say it's like maybe 2015, 16?
I started it in, I want to say it became let's see, let me think. I first talked to Tom about it in July, I believe it was, of 2016. Then October of 2016 is when it became official. And then I started on it in December once I finally received the footage. So December of 2016 is when I officially started the game.
That is an insane turnaround time.
Yeah.
Because like I'm now
That's,
thinking about it, it
it
was
could
like,
have been shorter, but I kind of dragged my feet on it a little bit.
well, I mean, this is like not to discredit any of your past work for it. This is like your first big thing and like the first official product. Because I don't think any of the iOS ports like had Screaming Villain's name on it. Like, didn't Screaming Villains probably start with Night Trap?
Yeah. Because when I applied to Sony to be a developer, I had to have a company name, and I couldn't think of anything. And then because like you have to get to apply, like before you even apply to be a console developer, you got to have like a tax ID number. You got to be set up as a business, have an LLC filed, all this stupid stuff. And you can't do any of that unless you have a business name. So when I applied to Sony, I literally just started sticking random words together until I found something that wasn't used. And that's where the name Screaming Villains came from.
And if I'm not mistaken, to this day, after like 3 or so years, it is still a one-man operation, even though it is plural in the title.
Yeah.
That's like my favorite part because because especially because like for the longest time, even though like I've been very vocal in terms of like my interest in like fandom with Night Trap, like for any of the people who like ever kind of want to like throw shit at you, it's so funny to be like people like they don't think of you always. It's like, oh man, Screaming Villains, a bunch of like lazy people or whatever. Be like, it's one guy.
Right.
But like the closest you really get to that is like the guy in the hood that's part of the logo. That's about as close as you ever get. Which actually
Right.
isn't even on the logo anymore because you I guess changed it last year with Corpse Killer, or if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It got changed because it was one of those things where, because I'm impatient, I just threw it together really quick, like the name and then the logo. And over time, I've kind of felt like it was too clip arty, and then um, it didn't really work really well on packaging because
With like the
you have to,
icon.
yeah, like the icon shrinking it down, it didn't look very good. So I just came up with a simplified version of it.
Okay, that makes sense for it, but that's I still am like reeling from the fact that you basically knocked it out. And I'm gonna assume like 6, 7 months tops by the time you had to submit for digital and physical.
I would say, let's see, I started in December, and then the game was done in April when it was first announced. It was already finished.
Yeah, because I remember that was when the game first that had that announcement trailer. When you basically kind of had the blowout. That's also when you announced like the physical version. It's like there was already a good amount of like the game like kind of displayed. Like you'd already had the finalized HUD for the new 17 look and everything like that.
Mhm. Yeah, it was already completely finished at that point, and then it got pushed back to August because of stuff with Microsoft.
So that's probably, I guess, one of the first elephants in the room. What is the actual status of Night Trap on Xbox? Because you've shown like pictures of it in the past, like it exists in a way, shape, and
Yeah.
form.
The problem is part of it is time, because with these games like Night Trap, for example, since it was a licensing agreement, I only had a certain amount of time to get the game made, or else I was going to lose it. And then but then the other issue is that communication with Microsoft is extremely bad, because like with Sony, for example, I applied to them to be a developer in December, and I got approved 2 weeks later. In January, I already had dev kits showing up at my house to where I can build the game in PlayStation. With Microsoft, I applied to them at the same time as Sony, and then I didn't even receive dev kits from them until June,
Wow.
which in June was going to be the month that the game was originally going to be released, because when I did the announcer trailer, it said it was coming spring 2017,
Mm-hmm.
and it was going to be released on the final day of spring, which was a Tuesday when digital releases come out on the stores and stuff like that. But at that point, I still didn't even have dev kits from Microsoft. And then once I got it, I didn't even have access to their development tools, which I didn't get until early August, I think, maybe July. I can't remember. And then at this point, I was like, this is stupid. I can't keep delaying this game. I need to figure something out. So then I actually had to ask Microsoft for permission to release it on PlayStation 4 and Xbox later, because Microsoft has this thing to where if you release a game that's multi-platform, if you're releasing it on something besides Xbox, the Xbox version either has to come out first or it has to come out at the same time as all the other versions. So I had to ask them permission to go ahead and release it on PlayStation first. And then they granted me that. But then once Night Trap came out, I immediately had to start double switch. So basically Night Trap on Xbox got put on hold basically because of that, because all these games, they're split up between two owners. So what happens is I'll do one for one owner, being Tom, and then once that game's done, then I'll have Flash Filmworks wanting their game to be next because they own half the games too. So then I have to jump to that one, and then when I get halfway through that one, Tom wants his game next. So it's like I literally have no time in between each game. It's seriously one after another.
Is it like publicly kind of known at all, like how the library got split up like that? Was that like just different people at like Digital Pictures back in the day, like when they kind of like sold off some rights, or is it just kind of like a wild mess of all over the place?
It's not really public knowledge, but what happened is in the 90s, like if you go to Digital Pictures Wikipedia page, it says they shut down because of the declining popularity of FMV games, but that's not true.
Yeah, because they're still technically like a company right now, right?
No, it's not. It doesn't even exist anymore. But
Oh,
what
okay.
happened was one thing that a lot of people don't know is that Digital Pictures was actually in the process of moving away from FMV. Because if you look at their games as they progress, they start incorporating more gameplay elements to where they act more as an actual game instead of an interactive movie. And then so what happened was they were working on a game called Maximum Surge, which was basically going to be like their first attempt at making a full-blown video game that incorporates FMV elements. But then during the development of that game, Digital Pictures publisher went bankrupt, and that's what caused Digital Pictures to shut down. So then the games, they went up for sale in bankruptcy court, and then a guy named Bill Mesa, who owns Flash Filmworks, they're a visual effects company in Hollywood, he was actually the guy directing Maximum Surge. So he bought half the games in bankruptcy court. So that's how all the games got split up between two people.
Interesting. Yeah, the reason I thought that Digital Pictures was kind of still a thing is because well, I guess with all of your games that you've done with them so far, at least the 3 so far, the logo has kind of always been there. So it's not really been out of a like source of, okay, I have to do this because that's part of the company who owns it. It's more of like, hey, we're paying like tributes to like the original developers.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like you can't play a digital pictures game without the digital pictures logo at the beginning. That's
Yeah.
how I feel
Also,
about it,
can
at
I
least.
just say thank you for never making that look any better? Just that the grimy opening that is there. Like if it looked like if that ever got remade into like 4K, I'd be like, this is wrong. This looks too good.
Yeah, that was something that bugged me, the whole 4K thing, because like I remember when Night Trap first got announced, people were complaining about it being in 4K, and it's like, do you really need Night Trap in 4K? I mean, you really don't.
Hasn't Dana Plato suffered enough? No one needs to see whatever that looked like in 4K. No one looks that good in 4K.
That's right. It's like I don't need to be able to see Commander Sims's nose hairs. I mean, it's stupid. It's like if you once you go 4K, it kind of takes away the charm from it, because to me, what was important with Night Trap was that I still wanted, like doing the new version, I wanted it to look as 80s as possible. And plus, even doing a 4K version wasn't even possible because, again, the film that was gone. We didn't have the film to do a proper transfer. All we had was beta tapes.
Yeah, so and one of the other reasons I kind of thought it was still a thing is I don't remember if it was on the Blu-ray with My Life in Gaming or the like in-game documentary of James Riley, because he did specifically say like if it could ever happen, he would be interested in going back to do like another kind of Night Trap like game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talking about Night Trap 2?
I see. It's been so long since I watched it, I couldn't actually remember if he said it, so I didn't want to assume. But
Yeah,
yeah.
he said it.
Okay.
Night Trap 2, I don't even know if that's happening. Like, I knew that he wanted to do a sequel, but I haven't heard anything since then. I think the issue with it was that, like, I don't even know if it's definitely going to happen or if it isn't. I've never gotten a 100% confirmation on it. But from what I remember, it seemed like everybody had their own idea of what Night Trap Part 2 should be. And I don't think anyone could really agree on that.
I'll say this.
Because, like, I know...
with the reception that came after the main one, that could be a game that would, I think, be pretty easily kickstarted. Like, if you came in with a clear, here's what we are going to do, it is going to be just as campy as the original, without being, like, super Force Awakens-y, like, rub it on your face in terms of, like, how blatant it is, I think that could be a game that people, even in 2020 or later, would still be interested in.
Right. It's just, like, doing something like Night Trap 2 is hard, because, like, I'm fully aware that people say that Night Trap has bad acting, and like I still believe it doesn't, mainly because that thing was filmed in 1986. The acting in that game really isn't any different from any of the horror films that was made in the 80s.
No, yeah.
So, like,
and you're and from what I remember as well, like you're a really big like old horror fan as well. Like so it's not like this was a new genre to you like with Night Trap.
Right. So like when you have like something like if you had something like Night Trap come out in 1987 like it was supposed to, then yeah, it would make sense. But then when you have it come out 5 years later in 92, then it's a completely different time period, and obviously the quality of films have gone up in that point. So it's like, okay, yeah, this is bad acting, when really it's no different than acting from the 80s, which is when it was made. It's just, but then like going back to what I was saying, like if you do Night Trap 2 today, it's kind of tricky, because when you do when people do stuff in the 80s, like that's based in the 80s or it's influenced by the 80s, it's their own interpretation of what the 80s is, and it kind of comes off as being really cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you try to do something like Night Trap 2 and try to put it in that time period, it's going to come across as being very bad.
You know, it's funny, you bring up a really good point, that a game I played recently for the first time that gave me faith that something like a Night Trap 2 would still work
Hmm.
When I played through Shenmue 1 and 2 for the first time, like I'd never ever touched Shenmue for the first time until maybe like 2 months ago, and then going into 3, that is a good definition of a game that is like so up its butt in terms of its game design and its world being so out of place and out of time for 2019, but they knew that going into it. And yeah, it's going to turn off a bunch of people, but
Right.
I have met zero Shenmue fans who played Shenmue 3 and went, all right, there are probably some like minor gripes in terms of getting more original voice actors back and other things like that, but at its core, it feels like it is a game that came out in 2003 on the Dreamcast, which
Right.
is hard to get.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever thought about it. If you had like a quick one-sentence pitch, like you're in a board meeting, they're pretty close to just saying yes to whatever. Let's say this is Netflix 3 years ago. They're gonna fund
Hmm.
Night Trap 2. What is your one-sentence pitch?
Ugh. I don't know, because like 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said branching storylines because it wasn't really being done yet with FMV,
Mm-hmm.
but now it has. So it's like, I don't know.
And honestly, I feel like there's still a lot of like juice that could be kind of gotten out of the number of static cameras, and you gotta just follow the story while going along with the main gameplay task. Because yeah, you're right.
Right.
Like most of FMV games now are like adventure games. They split off. Like you're not having to play catch up as much with the story, which is why some people can kind of get turned off of it. Like, oh, how am I supposed to play the game while following the story? But I kind of always enjoyed that challenge of I want to get
Right.
both. Like no
Right.
one's going into their first game of Night Trap getting all 100 dogs.
Right.
You're gonna watch the kitchen scene a few times. You're gonna watch them singing. You're gonna like go through like it's not gonna be perfect because your first playthrough's not supposed to be.
Yeah, it's a generational thing, because like with games today, they'll usually play through a whole game once, and then once they unlock everything, they're done with it. But games back then, you were basically repeating them. You were basically playing them over and over and over, because like they're all short. It's like your parents were buying your games, so you had to get time out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So like DuckTales, for example, on Nintendo, game's 10 minutes long, but I can't count how many times I've played that game. It was a different time back then, and plus with Night Trap at that time, you would play it over and over, so you would play through and then kind of pick up, like try to figure out how you play the game, because it is different, and there really wasn't anything like it at the time. And then once you get it down, then you start going through trying to capture everything, then you start picking up more on the story. So it's definitely something that requires multiple playthroughs, but with today's games, they're not really designed like that. I mean, some are, but a majority of them aren't. They're basically designed to where you play through it once and you get everything out of it. But like the exceptions to that rule would be stuff like Detroit Become Human, for example. Like something like that would take multiple playthroughs.
Mm-hmm.
But Call of Duty, on the other hand, you just play through it once and you got the story. You got everything out of it.
Okay. And actually, going back to a little bit about what you're saying, how a lot of people view the acting as like either more bad instead of like kind of cheesy and like B-movie. As someone, I like to say I'm pretty unbiased in this situation.
Mhm.
Jesus, probably a month ago at this point, when I was going through the Vita version after the latest patch had gone out, I
Mhm.
think in about the course of 2 weeks, I probably played through from beginning to end at least 20 to 30 like full playthroughs of that.
Right.
And every time I got that like to their scenes, every time I started with Tony and stuff, like with the door, I would always quote the door scene. I don't know why. In my head, when I think of funny Night Trap moments, it's like, can you close the door? The teleporting to the gun, and just like some of the like wink wink nudge nudge shots at the camera I will quote while playing, or even like out to myself. I just find them like so funny because the actors aren't like doing a bad job. Like they're doing it on purpose, and it's just still funny to this day.
Right. It's just like Night Trap was basically an experiment, and they were really like, it hadn't been done at the time, and they were, I guess, kind of figuring out as they went. Because like when you look at Night Trap, it's filmed the exact same way as a sitcom.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And even when you look at all the production notes, it's basically filmed like, okay, we're gonna film this episode of Full House, but in every room at the same time, and gonna have a lot of B footage.
Right. Right.
So Night Trap comes out. I remember it was August for the physical versions. Was it also the same month for digital as well?
Yeah, the physical came out on a Friday, and then the digital one came out the following Tuesday.
How did it feel having? I think this is safe to say because I got into limited run with their second game, so I never really knew the stress of like breach and clear originally. But
Mhm.
how did it feel having the first holy shit sales day? Because I remember that like FMV Friday, it was Night Trap, PC version of Night Trap, a whole bunch of goodies, and the bunker. All went up on the same day, and I remember just losing my mind along with a bunch of other people because no one had any idea how well that was going to sell.
Yeah, nobody did really. That was a very stressful week. Um, I remember when, uh, let me think. When I first talked to Limited Run about Night Trap, it was originally going to be 3,000 copies, and that was it. And then once the game got announced, we weren't expecting the reaction that it was getting.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of saw it, like I knew it was going to have a big reaction, but I didn't expect it to be what it ended up being. And then like nobody did really because it's Night Trap. And then after that, it was like Josh was like, maybe we should increase this to 5,000 copies. And then I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, because ever since this game is announced, this is the most time we've spent on Twitter after making an announcement. So the demand's there. Let's increase it. I was like, all right, cool. So then it got increased to 5,000. Then a week later, maybe not even a week later, like Twitter's still blowing up over Night Trap. And then then Josh was like, okay, why don't we increase this again, but add 3,000 collector's editions? And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Then it turned into let's add 2,000 PC copies also. So I'm like, holy shit, we're now
I
up to like
I
10,000
remember
copies.
that PC version got added like 3 days before. Like no one even like I remember I somewhat broke the version of that coming out into public because I remember Josh tweeted out the poster and I replied to his tweet and I was like, oh, it's a really cool poster. Is that the one that comes with the PS4 version? I was like, oh no, this is gonna be on the PC physical. And then everyone's like,
Right.
"There's gonna be a PC physical," and then it felt like such like a mad dash of like trying to please everyone at the end that I think one of the big problems was, and it's like it goes back to what you're saying, it's so hard to like gauge this.
Right.
Like when you signed it was gonna be 3,000, you probably weren't going to think there's going to be a vinyl variant, there's going to be a T-shirt, there's going to be a Blu-ray, there's going to be a PC version, there's going to be multiple covers. Well, actually, at that time you probably would have known the multiple covers thing, but like there were so many SKUs that like if someone's gonna get one, it's a pretty safe bet looking at it now that like, hey, I want to get everything because like, hey, when's the last time
Right.
Night Trap merch has been released?
Yeah, that's basically what it was because it started out as one thing, and then as time went on, it was like, okay, we have to keep adding on more stuff because people want it. It's like I wasn't expecting to release a vinyl with the theme song. Like the day before I submitted the trailer, I just randomly added that at the end of the trailer to where go to nighttrap.com or whatever it was. I forgot the website address I put on there. It was like go there to download the theme song for free. And then once I saw the download numbers for the theme song, I told Josh, and he's all like, why don't we release it on a vinyl? And I'm like, you think people would buy it? And he's like, yeah, definitely. Let's do it. So then that's basically what it was. It was just people asking for stuff and then kind of figuring out how people were reacting to certain things and then just going off of that.
So this is a little inside baseball-y, but I've talked to a couple other developers who've worked with limited run and stuff before, and the way you've kind of talked about how the rights sort of worked with you getting to develop the game and publish it yourself, was it complicated to be able to work with limited run, or basically when you got the rights to work on Night Trap 25th anniversary, like was it any extra hurdle to then sign on with limited run, or like did you have to go back and check with them that it was okay?
No, not at all. It was a pretty easy process. Like the way the limited run came up, like with Night Trap, with the Night Trap license, it was basically I can do whatever I want with it, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then the way limited run came up was Corey from My Life in Gaming, the guy that did the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
He actually lived right down the street from me. He was the very first person that I told that I was going to be doing Night Trap, which was, I think I told him that previous summer after I talked to Tom Zito on the phone about it originally. And then, because he's a big Night Trap fan too. And then when I told him about it, I was all like, you know, it'd be really cool if we made like a documentary as kind of like a marketing tool to kind of explain how this game was made, because there really wasn't there wasn't that much info out there or any behind the scenes stuff explaining how these FMV games were made. And I thought that would have been a cool way to promote it. So then when I told him about that, he's like, oh, that'd be pretty cool. But then at the same time, I kind of got the impression that he thought I might have been full of shit, like I really wasn't going to be doing Night Trap. And then once it became official, he started doing the documentary. And then he came to my house to film my interview portions for it. Actually, no, back up before that. When I told him, sometime around the time I told him that I was doing Night Trap, he mentioned limited run games to me and was all like, you should get it released through limited run. And then at the time, I didn't really know a whole lot about limited run games. Like, I knew of them because Corey had just did a documentary about them as well. So I knew the name, but I wasn't fully familiar with them. And then he kept bringing it up again over the next few months. And then I kept saying no because I was paranoid about Night Trap getting out, like it getting out that it was being remade, because I knew that in order for the announcement to work the way it needed to, it had to totally come out of nowhere. I couldn't have rumors out floating around out there that it could possibly be coming or anything, because I knew it wouldn't have as big of an impact. So then when he came over to my house to interview me for my part of the documentary, once he was finished, he was all like, did you give any more thoughts to the limited run idea? And I'm like, yeah, a little bit. And he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, all right, the game's done. I feel comfortable with it now. Go ahead and tell them that I'm working on it. So then he left my house, and then not even 10 minutes later, I had an email from Josh at Limited Run already asking if I would be interested in publishing it with them. And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it.
That's so funny. And in case anyone's listening to this and thinks you might be acting a little hyperbolic about the announcement, you're totally right about it. A great example is actually happening right now with WB
Right.
Montreal and that new Batman game they've been teasing for the last like 4+
Mhm.
months. It's been, guess what? By the time they announce that, no one will be happy. By the time they
Right.
announce it and they say it's Court of Owls, we'll be mad because guess what? Why did we wait this long if we all knew what it was? And then if they announce it and it's not Court of Owls, what the hell? Why is it not Court of Owls after months and months of like because the more time you let fans speculate and kind of like build it up, you're never going to live up to what they thought it could be when you could have just kind of surprised them all at once with a big info dump.
Right.
So in terms of like collecting, are you much of a game collector yourself?
I collect NES games.
Okay.
And then I started doing but I figured out very quickly that with NES games, once you get in the 500 range, it starts going extremely slow.
Oh wow.
Because that's when you get to like the games that cost like outrageous amount of money, or the really cheap games that you don't normally run into. Like Wheel of Fortune, for example, there's like 4 different ones for Nintendo. Same with Jeopardy. So when you see one at a store that you don't have, you're like, maybe I do have that. And then, so yeah, once you get in that range, then once I got there, I started branching off and started doing Sega CD and Sega Saturn. But I mean, I still collect them, but it's not going as quickly as it was before. Because when I started it, I lived pretty close to a retro gaming store, and I moved about a year ago, so now it's like an hour drive away, so I'm not going up there as often to collect them anymore. But
Yeah.
I still collect though.
I can relate to that in a couple of different ways. For whatever reason, even though I'm in probably the most populated part of Kansas, our game stores, like, we have nothing that's like a actual retro game store into that avail. And my biggest thing that I enjoy collecting is the PlayStation Vita, which when like I got really big into collecting 2016, 17 was getting all these games, and I've ticked off so many things from my like list or whatever at this point. Now I'm just kind of like, okay, what's coming out in terms of what I can get? And so it's so funny to be like, okay, Even with now, there are the games that are like, okay, I know Limited Run have 3 games that are all done and ready, and we're just waiting for them. And I know Nicholas has 2 games, we're all just done and waiting for them. It's now not even, hey, will you make this game happen? It's, will you just let us buy these games we know are made back in February last year? So it's so weird, because the community is not even like, we can't really beg for games anymore, at least especially with the Western audience. So it's just like, can we just have the games you announced like last year, please?
Right.
So Night Trap came out. Obviously, the physical version blew everything kind of out of the water, and obviously,
I got death threats over that.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was the thing. Like, the reception of that was so negative. It was so funny. Like, did you ever like have a conversation with like Josh or Douglas at Limited Run where you're like, okay, I know you guys. Like, the whole point is a one-print run thing. Was there ever a moment after that first sales wave like blew up so fast where you're like, should we just throw it up for like 1 or 2 more days as a pre-order and just basically shut everyone up? Or was it just kind of like okay, well, we'll just take our licks and try and move on to the next thing and do it better?
At the time, they were a little bit more strict about things because I actually suggested the idea of doing a pre-order because I was worried that as many copies as we were going to have available, which at the time was more than they've ever done for any game.
Oh yeah, because at the time, if anyone doesn't know, like their biggest game was 5,000. Like their last biggest game was a Spike Chunsoft downloadable game called One Way Heroics that was like 5,000, and that was like insane. Actually, I think Mike Bithel's volume might have been a little bit more, but like anything above 6,000 was like insane at the time. And so like having over 8,000, I guess if you include the 32X cover and stuff, was just like, okay, I guess it's going to be enough, because it also was their first FMV game, and when was the last time an FMV game had a physical release? Like, it was so many factors. Like, I remember I actually missed out on everything but the Collector's Edition. And I wasn't actually mad because I at least kind of knew, okay, I'd had a history of buying with them. I was on, like, friendlier terms with, like, Douglas and stuff at the time. I was like, okay, I could probably have someone, like, hook me up for it. But my immediate thought wasn't like, oh my god, you guys personally spited me and you've ruined my collection. But it was so interesting seeing how, like, people just, like, turn sour so fast.
Yeah, like, at first I thought the amount of copies we had was going to be enough. But then as it got closer to the release date, I started to worry a little bit, and then that's when I brought up the idea of doing a pre-order, and then they were like, no, we can't do a pre-order because of what happened with Skullgirls.
Yeah, that was such a, I mean, honestly, it's so funny. There were like 3 big things that like led to that being like a giant like shit show. The Skullgirls delay into infinity, the Night Trap sale, and then out of all things, obviously it was more Wonder Boy, but the sales day that was Wonder Boy and Lawbreaker. I remember that one when those 2 happened, it was just like, oh, okay, we've had 2 of these really close to, like, they were like less than a month back to each other, like Wonder Boy coming back, like the remake by .emu. When that one came out and sold out just as fast as Night Trap, it was like people kind of thought this is what it's just going to be like from now on.
Right. Because, like, with the whole Skullgirl situation, like, what happened, like, I don't know the full story. I'm sure it's out there, but it didn't have anything to do with Limited Run. It was more with stuff with the developers. But Limited Run suffered on it because, obviously, they got a bunch of crap for it because they did a pre-sale for a game and nobody's getting their copies, which they didn't have any control over. And then, on top of that, they were getting so many inquiries about it, and they had to increase their staff on customer support. So now they were having to spend even more money just because of this game they still hadn't released yet. So with Night Trap, when I suggested doing a pre-sale, it got shut down immediately just because the whole Skullgirls thing turned out into a big mess, which they weren't anticipating at all.
People think that if you put a popular game up for pre-order, like a Night Trap or it's honestly like anything really of note, especially for like PlayStation games at the time, they think as many copies as you sold out of at 9 a.m. in 1 second, an infinite amount of more people will come to that sale and fill out those numbers, which is sadly not true. Most people don't know, any game that Limited Run has ever done on PlayStation 4, I know for a fact is going to be one of their least best-selling games, with the exception of, I think, like Bloodstained. Everything else they've done that's ever been super open, like, pre-order has been, like, less than 2,000 in most cases, and those end up being, like, their most rare games, which is really bonkers, but it's just that weird perception of pre-orders are good, limited numbers are bad, when the reality is, hey, the developer might, like, if it was open pre-order, there's a chance that it might not have sold all of those 8,000 copies that it did at 9 a.m. So it's like, especially
Right, exactly.
for you who, like, this is your livelihood, it's hard to really, like, put that on the line.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because that was another thing that came up. Because like 8,000, it's more, it's a big number compared to all their other releases, but at the same time, it's like 8,000 really isn't that much with games. So it's like, even that was something I think Josh even mentioned at one point. He was like, if we do a pre-order, then we can risk the possibility of not even selling that many. But if we put a hard number on it, then it will most likely sell out.
Besides the, I think, negative takeaway from it at the original release, when people did start finally getting their copies in with the collector's edition and stuff like that, what was that kind of like, having your first big game you worked on actually having a physical release? And people, like, I remember a big point was, like, people really enjoyed the new cover, the old retro cover, as well as, like, the manual and poster treatment.
It was a weird situation because I'm trying to think where to start with this. Like, the Night Trap release, that whole week was kind of a bad experience to me, because what happened is like, trying to think where to start with this story. All right, so what a lot of people don't know is that at the time my girlfriend was pregnant while I was working on this game. So I have a baby on the way while I'm working on this. Then the sale for Night Trap happens, which is on a Friday. Then that night, I'm working on a day one patch for the game, which was basically to add additional languages to it. And then, because the original version that was submitted to Sony, it didn't have the option to change the language to French, so I was adding that. And then that night, my girlfriend's water breaks. So Saturday, the following day after the sale, I'm at the hospital, we're having a baby, and as I'm trying to take pictures of my kid being born, my phone is blowing up by random people that I don't know, messaging me on Facebook, either bitching at me about the limited run sale because they weren't able to buy a copy, or it was people I didn't know and people I didn't know asking me for a downloadable code so they can get the game for free. So I'm trying to take pictures of my kid, like on the changing table, and my phone is literally going off nonstop. Like, just in the delivery room alone, I got something like 60 notifications from just random people I didn't know messaging my personal Facebook page asking me for all this stuff. So that got really annoying. And then once the game was released on Tuesday, at that point I was just checked out, just because I was so just aggravated with what happened over that weekend due to the sale and getting death threats and people bitching at me for not getting a copy. And like, I'm trying to have a kid here, and you're telling me that I need to go fuck myself because you weren't able to get a game off a website. And it's stupid.
And like, would you say, were there ever any people out there who, like, kind of, when, like, cooler heads prevailed, maybe even down the line, has anyone, like, ever, like, kind of went, like, back and, like, messaged you and be like, hey, I finally got a copy through, like, the wait list or whatever. I'm sorry I, like, said all that stupid shit. I was just really angry or whatever. Is it pretty much no one ever kind of messaged back? They just wanted to blow off steam towards you because they viewed you as, like, a, like, faceless, like, entity.
Yeah, that's never happened.
Well, I at least had to try. I was at least hoping one person out there was like, oh, you know what? I got my copy on the waitlist thing. You know what?
Right.
You know what would be the best story ever? And if someone out there is listening or could at least make this up and make me feel like this is true, if someone missed out on all these copies after all these years for PlayStation 4 and, like, they finally got the 32X version, that was their first one after, like, 4 years of waiting, they'd be like, oh, it was finally worth it. I got the 32X cover.
I didn't even know that was happening.
Oh, don't worry. Nobody really was. I remember for the longest when that got announced for the blowout sale thing, or like the, like, pop-up shop, like, I distinctly remember, like, every month or so I would ask, because I had held on to, like, back when they did, like, support tickets. I
Hmm.
think in 2019, when they definitely stopped all the reward stuff, I had, like, 200 or something, and I just
Hmm.
mailed them all in, because I was like, what am I going to do with all these? Like, I'll just mail them all in at once and just do whatever I can. And I was like,
Right.
okay. I checked month after month. You gonna do the 32x cover? You gonna do the 32x cover? You gonna do it? And it was just like, no, probably not, definitely not. And I'm like, it's been so many years. There's no way it's ever going to happen. So I just redeemed it on something else. And then finally, when it got announced, I was like, oh, well, I love Night Trap, but I don't think I can justify flying for one day down to North Carolina to get a copy.
Yeah, that was how I found out about it. Like, Josh had told me several times since then that he was going to bring it out, but I kept hearing it over and over, and eventually it got to a point where I didn't think it was ever going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got an email for the thing in North Carolina for their pop-up shop, and it said, get the 32X cover for Night Trap. I'm like, oh, I guess they did pull it off finally. And then I emailed about it, and he's like, yeah, we got it on hand already. I'm like, oh, cool. And then like when they did the blowout sale, I didn't even know it was going on sale for that until I saw it
No one
advertised.
knew until like the day before. With the blowout
Yeah.
sale, yeah, that one was literally like, okay, last thing. I at least
Yeah,
will.
I found out about that because random people I know was sending me a link to the page for it being on sale, and they're all and I'm like, what the hell's this? And then they're like, apparently Night Trap's going on sale tomorrow with the 32X cover, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know, but
I'm
cool.
gonna at least hope. Did they at least ask you to come to the pop-up shop like before you found out about the 32X cover, or was that also very last minute ad?
Oh, that was last minute too, because
Because
yeah,
I
like
knew how close you lived to them. That's why I was like, I could believe that they just called you up on a weekend and were like, you want to just come up here and just like sign some copies or whatever?
yeah, they had it coming out, and then when I saw the email or whatever, and then this was about a week before the shop, I think it was, and then
That's
I
so
just
funny.
emailed Josh, and I was all like, hey, like if you're all doing a pop-up shop and you're like having guests there to sign autographs, if you want, I can come down and sign copies of the 32X one since it's going to be on sale for the first time. And Josh like, dude, that'd be awesome. Yeah, let's do it. And then next thing I know, I'm going to North Carolina.
Can I just say, if anyone out there is listening to this who went to that pop-up shop, I'm so disappointed. Not a single person took a picture of you. Not even limited
No,
ones.
they did.
No, that uploaded online. No one has ever uploaded, because I remember when I saw that you were going there, I was like, okay, basically finding anything from you online was like impossible for all of 2019 for me. So I was like, oh, someone is going to upload a picture of him being there, right? And like I knew people who went there and took pictures, but no one ever uploaded it. And I was like, how? It was like you were like the deep throat in terms of trying to like find you in like 2019. I was like, how did no one at the pop up shop like have to like upload a picture? It was like so mind
Yeah,
boggling to me.
like I think there was three of us there doing autographs. Like we did take pictures with people, but I think we only did like at the most 5 pictures with someone. It was mostly just signing autographs the whole time. They had a big display set up next to our autograph table where you can get your picture taken, but I don't think people knew what that was
Oh yeah.
because it was just a giant banner with all the different box art for all the limited run releases. So I don't think anyone really put it together. But I mean, out of the three of us though, we did take some pictures though, but it wasn't many. I think each one of us only maybe got 5 at the most.
I'll
And
say
then
this.
but
I
most of the
did
autographs.
find one that's like someone had Mike Wazowski'd you basically, where there was like your booth and then someone was like holding up a game because they were like standing for like I think it was the like whoever was like right next to you like sitting down to sign. They were like holding up their game and like perfectly blocked off your body. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, awesome. Um,
That's
So kind of going back, yeah, wow. Like I knew I knew your kid was born around the same time of the launch, but no, that's kind of crazy how all of that happened at once. So really, like
yeah.
it was like the worst thing that could be happening out of ironically you selling a bunch of copies and interest of Night Trap being at probably its all-time high in like 20 years.
Right. Yeah, it was just a bunch of stuff happening within just a few days. So
So
it was a
I,
pretty stressful weekend.
so after it kind of like started winding down, what was the digital release kind of like for you outside of getting the day one patch out?
Um, I would say it went good. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that exactly.
There's no wrong answer.
Uh, I mean, I guess it went good. It's just I didn't really have anything to compare it to, just because that was my first console game.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's kind of a weird situation because it's like you should be excited about releasing a game, but really you're just stressed out the entire time. And then once you finally release it, that stress doubles.
So the game is finally out.
Mhm.
Um, for the most part, we're assuming like the worst of the worst is out of the way. How
Right.
quickly on that until Flash Film is knocking on your door for Double Switch?
Um, it wasn't long after that. Actually, they knew about it. Actually, I'm trying to think when that happened exactly. So I want to say about 2, maybe 3 months before Night Trap was released, Flash Filmworks called me, and then they asked me if I was working on anything at that time, and I told them I was doing Night Trap, and then which they were surprised about, and then because I think they were trying to get ownership of that game too at one point, and then but they were surprised because they didn't know I was in communication with Tom Zito, and then so Night Trap came out, and then once Night Trap came out, they were like, okay, let's go ahead and do Double Switch now. Because before Night Trap, I was trying to sell them on the idea of doing Double Switch for consoles, and they didn't want to do it for some reason. They strictly wanted to do mobile. But looking back, I'm glad it turned out that way, because there's no way I would be able to make a console version of Double Switch in 4 weeks. I'm not even going to attempt something like that. So it ended up working out for the better.
So all of your games actually, even going back to Night Trap and the iOS ports, how all are made in Unity. What kind of made you decide you wanted to build the wrapper for them all? Because I'm assuming the framework is pretty similar, at least between Night Trap and Double Switch, just due to the fact of how they play with the triggers and cameras.
Not really. Like, one thing about these games is that a lot of people are under the impression that they're ports with upgraded video quality, but that's not the case. They're completely rebuilt from the ground up. Like, I start completely from scratch and just rebuild the entire game. And then if the original source code's available, I'll use that as a reference for like timing and for like times and stuff like that for when certain things are supposed to happen. But other than that, that's pretty much it. But the reason why I went with Unity was just because with FMV games, you can make them faster in that.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so I guess so. It's 2018 is basically you start. Is Double Switch your main project, or at what time did you decide to order a Vita dev kit? And like, what was kind of the story behind? Because I remember at one point you tweeted out when you got your Vita dev kit box. I don't exactly remember when that was, but like, when did that process kind of start of working on both games at once?
Vita was actually before Double Switch. Like,
Oh,
I didn't do them
really?
at the same time. Yeah. Um, I guess I'll go ahead and explain the entire Vita story since I know it's heading towards what it's heading towards. So I'll go ahead and get all this out of the way. All right. So what happened with Vita was I had no plans of doing a Vita version because I didn't think there was a market for Vita. Like, I didn't think people were still playing it basically because I kind of got the impression it was on its way out and I wasn't really seeing any games being released for it anymore. And then before Night Trap came out on PlayStation 4, I asked Josh about Nintendo Switch because there was rumors going around at that point about them possibly doing Switch releases. It wasn't confirmed yet at the time, but there were rumors going around about it. So then I asked him about Switch, and he said that they were working on it. It's not a definite thing yet, but if I'm trying to do like a portable version, would I be interested in doing a Vita one? I'm like, yeah, I guess I can do it. I mean, I didn't really think of doing a Vita version, but if you want it, then I'll go ahead and do it. So then I I contacted my account manager from Sony to ask about a Vita dev kit. 2 weeks went by. They were completely out of dev kits because nobody was really requesting them anymore, so they weren't manufacturing them anymore. They were completely out of stock. The only way I got a Vita dev kit was because an employee had an extra one and he gave me his, so the way I can make the game. So that's how I ended up with one. And then so I took the the PlayStation version of Night Trap and basically just started dumbing down everything as much as I could in order to get it to work on a Vita, because Vita hardware is very limited. It's basically an underpowered iPad Air 2. Like, the specs on it aren't great at all.
Because the big thing with the Vita in terms of development, if I'm remembering correctly, is what kind of makes it harder for new games is it's really, really low on CPU, right?
Yeah, memory too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I got the dev kit and it had 512 megabytes of memory. Then it turns out the retail one's only 256. So I'm like, shit, this thing's more powerful than what people actually have. So that was another problem I had with it too. But yeah, so it was basically just taking the PlayStation 1 and trying to dumb down everything as much as I could so that way I can get it to work on there. And then because Night Trap is a very CPU heavy game and GPU too. And then so did that, and then was kind of modifying all the menus and layouts to have it make sense for a Vita, because like with the layout on the PlayStation 4 one, how it has a computer monitor sitting on a desk, that ain't going to work on Vita. So I had to redesign stuff like that. Then the game was finished. It was finished before, we think. Sorry, I got a starburst in my mouth.
No, you're good.
Because I chain smoke on these phone conversations. I'm trying to go back and forth.
It's good. It just makes it sound like you're just doing like tobacco chew instead, so it's even better.
Right. So I want to say PlayStation came out in August, and then the Vita version was finished in October, maybe November.
2017.
And then I started Double Switch in January.
What?
But then what happened was we never officially decided on a release date for Vita. And then once we started talking about a release date, it kept getting pushed back and back and back. And then eventually it got to a point where it's like, okay, like Limited Run wanted to release it at the same time as Double Switch on PlayStation. And then that's when they did their Next Level Friday sale, which was double Switch on PlayStation 4, Night Trap on Vita. And then so it came out it went on sale a year after it was already completed. Now, as far as the glitch that happened that I got fucking harassed about so bad, this is what happened with that. So, I mean, I definitely take responsibility for this. So I definitely apologize for what happened, but this is what happened. Oh, hold on. Lighting my cigarettes is going to stress me out talking about all this.
No, you're good. While you like,
Vita makes my eye twitch.
Yeah, while you like that, I do want to preface this for anyone out there, because I know there's going to be a lot of people like on Vita Island who are really curious about this. I think it was just like a mixture of like so many weird things of like the most vocal people out there were pretty much heard it was broken and weren't actually people who played it. Judging by the fact that I remember when the patch actually came out, I was literally first one after before it was even announced. This is my sad life, Tyler. I every couple of weeks would go to the Vita home screen, refresh it, and would say, not this time. We'll try next week. Just because I knew it was coming. So many people had given up, and obviously the timeline, you can kind of go into it for it, but like I knew it was coming. I knew it was, like you guys weren't sitting back there like twirling your mustache and be like, oh man, we got him. One of the last Vita games, a bunch of rubes over here.
Right. Like, but what happened with all that was, contrary to popular belief, developers do not purposely try to release a broken game as a cash grab. That's not what it is. I mean, you could basically kill your livelihood that way, you know? So it's like what happened was the game was finished, and then it kept getting pushed back and back, and then finally a year later, Limited Run was finally ready to release it. So I submitted the game to Sony, it got through testing, and then it passed, and then the sale went on. Then people started receiving copies of it, and then I started getting blown up with emails and about the game being broken. And I'm like, what the hell? I mean, it shouldn't be broken. I've played this game a million times. So I get my Vita dev kit out. Like, I hadn't even used my dev kit in over a year because I had moved since then, and Vita was already done and over with Night Trap. So I pull it out, start playing the game, and I'm like, this is fine. What the hell's everyone talking about? So then I went back and logged into my Sony account, downloaded the build I submitted, installed it on my dev kit, and it was broken. I'm like, all right, what the fuck happened? So after investigating, I think what happened is that the game was finished, and then a year later, when I finally submitted it to Sony, I submitted an earlier build of the game that wasn't completely finished, and it somehow got through Sony's testing. How? I do not know.
Well,
but
listen, there are games, we won't name any, Life of Black Tiger. Sony's cert is not flawless, neither is Microsoft or Nintendo. Nintendo has straight up just uploaded porn without it even being in English before. No one is perfect. But, I mean, no, honestly, I think one of the best things about this that makes me so glad I'm able to do this with you right now is the narrative for the longest time from the community was Vita carts are ending, we've got to rush, this game is barely getting made, we made it in like 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah.
It was done a year before it even went on sale.
That's the craziest thing is like now when you place that it's like, okay, you had all this time made from the game is done to it being uploaded and like submitted, like that makes the mistake make way more sense in the sense of like
right.
Okay, yeah. So
that explains and then as far as the patch, the time frame on getting that thing out, here's what happened with that. So when I find out about the Vita thing, it was when Josh emailed me to tell me about it. And then at the time I had gotten like 2 days before he emailed me, I had gotten surgery, and then I had laser surgery around my eyes, so I had stitches on them. So at that point I couldn't even really work on anything. So I told him what was going on, and then I was like, yeah, as soon as I get all healed up, I'll go back to work and get this taken care of and get it fixed and straightened out. And then once I went back to work, that's when I found out about the whole issue with it being like what was broken exactly and what happened. And then so when you develop a game, you get a development key and a retail key. The difference between the two is that the development key, it allows you to develop your game. And then when you make a build and test it on a dev kit or a test kit, there's a watermark on it that says development build. So, and then when it comes time to get your game submitted, you request a retail key, which removes that watermark, and it's only good for 60 days, I believe. Well, my key was already expired at that point because it had been a year since I worked on the Vita version.
So is this a Unity development key or a Sony development key?
It's a Unity one.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify because I know some people out there might be thinking it's more of a Sony thing than a Unity thing. So
right.
Keep going.
But then what you request them through Sony though. Mm-hmm. So what happened was, so then after that, I had to have a retail key in order to put out a patch and submit it, or else a fixed version was going to have a big watermark on the screen. So then I requested a key. I didn't get a response for some reason. So then a couple more months went by where I kept trying to request one, wasn't hearing anything for whatever reason. So then Limited Run, they were like, well, we can go ahead and send you our retail key so that way you can get this, fixed and get the patch out since it's ready to go. And then so then they sent me their key, and then at that point I was already working on Corpse Killer, and I had a ridiculous deadline on Corpse Killer. So I had to get that finished first before I can stop everything that I was doing and jump back onto Vita. So once Corpse Killer was done, I pulled Vita back out, and the key that Limited Run sent me, that was now expired. So then Limited Run, they went ahead and tried to request a key for me, and we didn't get a response until 3 months later. So, yeah, that's why it took so long for the patch to come out. But the day I got the key, that patch went out immediately.
Yeah, because I remember for the longest time, because after basically, I'm guessing, was it pretty much the Night Trap release that kind of was one of the big factors that made you kind of want to get off Twitter and stuff like that?
No, I just was never a fan of Twitter. I mean, I guess Night Trap kind of contributed to it. Like, if you go to my Twitter, it says I set up that account, I think in like 2010 or 2011. I didn't start tweeting anything until Night Trap, which was 6-7 years later. And then it got to a point where Twitter just isn't for me. It
No,
really is.
yeah, I totally get that. But I mean,
Like,
optically, a lot of people just kind of assumed and jumped on that narrative for sure.
nah, yeah, of course they would, but that isn't the case. It's just like, even like going back, looking at how often I tweeted, it was very rare. It would be like one tweet a week. I'm not doing like 7 or 8 of them, or sometimes 20 in a day like everyone else is. It's just like, I'm just not a fan of social media in general. Like, I don't even like having a Facebook page, but I have that because it's connected to the Screen Villains page and whatever else. And if I deactivate my Facebook account, then I lose that. So that's the only reason I have a Facebook. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just not a fan of Twitter. But as far as the Night Trap thing goes with Twitter, it probably played a small part in it, but not a big one. And it's mainly because after the PlayStation version was released, actually before that, I would say from the time the game was announced up until it was released, whenever I would tweet something, my tweet would show up on a random gaming website as a news article. I didn't like that very much. That was just weird to me for some reason. But that, and then that whole situation with the Destructoid article, that kind of played a part in it too. And then there was another guy specifically who was constantly questioning me about the Xbox version of Night Trap. And
I know exactly what you're talking about. There's like this one guy he's like the more aggressive version of me, but for Night Trap on Xbox.
Right. And then he was like this was something that really kind of bugged me. Like, he was like, he would ask me about it, and then I was trying to be vague about stuff because, I don't want it, because like at that point I was like, I got to be careful what I post on Twitter, because every time I do something, it seems like it gets turned into a news article, and I didn't like that.
Yeah, because the power is being taken away from you. You feel like
right.
The spotlight is always on you, and you can't just have a conversation without it feeling like there's a microphone in your face.
Right, exactly. And I didn't like that. And then but then with the whole Xbox thing, like, there was one time where he was all like, well, I talked to someone close to the project and they told me it was canceled. I'm like, who? There isn't anyone close to the project.
The other screaming villains. The ones you're hiding in your basement.
Right. It's like, it's a one-man studio. There is no person close to the project. And then he didn't believe me. And I'm just like, he's like, well, my source told me this and that. And I'm like, what source? I'm literally the only source there is. And it just got stupid. And at that point, I was kind of done with it.
I understand that, for real. Going back to the Vita one, if you're okay with it, so you push the patch out. What has the experience been for you once it did come out, and do you have any sort of a plan kind of going on with that version?
From what I could tell, for the most part, it seems like people are happy with the Vita version now. I know there's a couple of minor glitches still in there, and those will be getting fixed. It's just, again, one-man studio. So,
so I'm a very sad person, and I like after because I ate for a PlayStation. Oh my God, why am I forgetting about it? The Vita Lounge. For the longest time, they've had this like Kickstarter disaster in terms of how long this magazine's been supposed to come out. But for their last issue, I wanted to write a review of Night Trap on Vita because it's such a unique case point. It's the only Vita like FMV game there will probably ever be, and it had such an interesting history of like being like the first kind of limited run game that had ever come out that was at launch originally unbeatable, and so it had this negative connotation of, okay, well, it's bad because you can't beat it without a patch.
Right.
So I wanted to wait
it's
for
like,
that patch.
what are the odds of that? The game stops working at the last scene.
It literally almost seems like a joke, because I remember when I had that happen at first with launch, I just let it keep going. I think I got it to if I recall right, I got the timer to go like max maxed out at 9999, and then I think my game just crashed or something. Because I was like,
Mm.
I'm sure it'll just it has to do something eventually. But no, so I kept wanting to wait for the patch and give it the benefit of the doubt so I could do a really good evaluation of it. And when the patch came out, there were still a couple people were saying Survivor mode still has a couple of things, but it was very uneven and it was not a lot of people were talking about it. So that's why I did so many playthroughs of all the different modes and all the different settings. And because like you can't just say, oh, I played through it in 2017 mode, and then I did a couple rounds in Survivor. It's like trying them all with all the different settings. Like there's just a lot of different little factors that I wanted to kind of throw in there with it.
Yeah.
So when I was done with it, I threw up this really big tweet that was basically just a thread of going over, okay, the biggest part that I think me and everyone really wanted from it was everything of content in that game can be played in terms of stuff you have to interact with. Like I know a big one for me was Scene of the Crime.
Right.
I really wanted to play Scene of the Crime. It's one of the most interesting things of that version. It's like my favorite thing with it. But one of the big like negatives with it that I'm not sure if you've seen is if you play Scene of the Crime on the Vita version, all the room's audios play at once.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, without being like, honestly, the game after you patched it has been like markedly better in terms of the overall experience, in terms of like
Right.
issues and whatnot for it. There's just like a few little weird things for it, but
Right.
because you would have to play so deeply into it, it's kind of hard to know that right away, you know?
Right.
And that's one of the things that I've kind of struggled with, especially. I know like Douglas and like maybe to like a lesser extent like Josh think that I'm harping on this game, like why isn't it fixed? I like want it, like I'm not trying to be the Xbox guy for it. I'm trying to be the hey, I love this game so much, like to a point where my girlfriend knows I have a problem with how much I play Night Trap, that like I want this to be the best version of this game because it is like such an interesting game. It is on my favorite platform of all time, and is just like such an odd like case point that like I would hate for it to have all these issues and then it never really get fixed, which is why I was so happy. Like as soon as that patch went out, the first thing I did when I came home off work is I finally beat it, and I remember I rolled credits and I uploaded it on Twitter, and I was like, oh my god, I've rolled credits on Night Trap for Vita. I never thought that day would happen, and it wasn't like, oh my god, what's wrong with you, Tyler? It was like, thank you for doing it.
Yeah. It wasn't. I mean, like I said, it was not my intention to release it that way. Just a bunch of weird stuff happened, and it ended up to where we are at now. But yeah, there is going to be. I can definitely say there will be another patch that will be getting released, and it will address the remaining issues. It's just when it's. I would like it to be sooner rather than later, but again. One-man studio. So.
No, yeah, and I totally get that. But yeah, the funniest thing is I think the only weird one is the only big one, and this is like such a like up your butt, like if you're a trophy hunter person, is that the platinum for whatever reason, there's one trigger in the game that makes the platinum unbeatable. I mean, that makes the platinum unobtainable.
What is it?
For whatever reason. And it's literally been me and one other guy, and I really, if he, for whatever reason he ever finds this, he originally tipped me off to this. In the end of the game, if, I need to get the name up, when Sarah bites Kelly, it never registers in the game for whatever reason. So you don't get that last little unlock, and that last unlock, I think, for the production stills, triggers everything else in the game to get you the last production thing, to say you got all the last videos, and that, like, finally triggers off the platinum. That's the last thing.
Okay, yeah, I actually got an email about that, actually, yeah. So, yeah, I know about that one.
Yeah, so that's the only big one that it's like, okay, yes, Survivor mode may randomly crash, but like compared to the original launch version, that's way, way, way less prevalent. And like a few little like timing things with it. That was the last like big one. Like obviously the Scene of the Crime thing is more of a like me as a big nerd who'd be like, oh, I really want to like I want to hear what this room says, not the other ones. But it's like I'm the only one I know who's ever complained about that because I'm the only one who's probably like actively seek that. Like I didn't want a perfect game for the trophy. I wanted a perfect game to play Scene of the Crime.
Right.
But yeah, like those are like are so many like little things for it now, which like I put that up there because it was like the game. Like my first tweet literally reads for it. I beat it. everything can be done. You can enjoy this game. Like, unless for whatever reason, if you can't platinum a game is ruined for you. This game is still enjoyable. It's still worth picking up. Like, I still recommend like people like buying even the digital version because it's like $10. It's like the cheapest version of that game, like without being on sale.
Yeah, it's $10.
Yeah, so like I at least want to take this moment to say, thank you for making that version of the game, because I'm sure you're like other devs out there. If it wasn't for that physical version, there's no way you could have justified making the Vita version to yourself.
Yeah, I mean I can say partly that, because I mean there is something about having a physical copy of your own game, but I mean if that hadn't come up, I would have never thought of making Night Trap on Vita, just because I didn't really think there was that many Vita players anymore.
There are a lot of us. Not a lot of us, but enough for us to, for the most part, we try to be positively vocal in terms of welcoming people, games still coming out, and stuff like that. Going back to the thing you kind of said, though, about like not really knowing what the Vita market was, do not feel bad, by the way. Like, last week I interviewed the CEO of Sekai Project, who's like this visual novel publisher. I told him they still make Vita games, like cartridges, physically in Asia, and he had no idea. He thought that just all Vita games had stopped. And I was like, how do you, like, you should know this, not me.
Right, yeah, that is true, because I remember the Vita version of Night Trap was originally going to be 5,000 copies, and then Limited Run found out Sony was going to stop manufacturing them.
That was such a stressful day, because when that leaked, I think Kotaku had originally leaked it. No one else really knew. There was a couple, maybe, like, that was really an internal Sony memo that came out to the public and everyone else at the same time, which was so funny because it happened, like, right before or during E3. And it was such a weird thing of, like, oh, okay, the Vita's ending, but then all these caveats of, well, technically you have until February, but you got to submit your code by June, but then actually it ended up being all the way until February. That's so crazy, though, going back to how early the game was kind of done. If you had it your way, and let's say the release didn't really need to be tied to Double Switch by itself, if you could go back in time, let's assume either way the patch isn't really an issue, would you have preferred to release it on its own, or did you also want to wait and tie it to another one of your releases?
I would have preferred to release it a year earlier, like I originally wanted to do, because if it was released earlier, then I wouldn't have got the final build mixed up with an earlier build a year later when it finally came time to submit it. Mm-hmm. So if it came out a year earlier, then all this stuff wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it's really interesting, just because there's a similar thing kind of happening now in the community, especially like with a limited run of. Are you aware of Super Meat Boy Forever?
Yeah.
How it has like the worst game ever for a game that's been delayed for like 8 years.
Wait, what?
Well, you know, like originally Super Meat Boy Forever was going to be like an iOS port that came out like it was originally supposed to come out in like 2010. And it's like still not out. So its big thing for the longest time was, okay, it's gonna come out. Like April last year was supposed to be its big, okay, this is the release date, and they're still kind of like finding it out, and which is totally fine. Like if you're a developer and you can do it, if you have Super Meat Boy money, take your time, make it the best game you possibly can. One of the interesting things in the community is the physical versions of stuff like Super Meat Boy are being held off until Forever is done. And so a big thing with the community is like, okay, that's cool if you want both games, but the crossover between people who only want the Vita version, Super Meat Boy Forever, which is not coming to the Vita, and people who are going to probably end up having to wait like another 6 months or so, it's like such this weird thing of, wouldn't the developer rather have the money now to put it into Forever, and then the people who just want the game kind of just get it and shut up?
Right.
So it's that weird one of like, I get it, it makes a release like more fun to like theme multiple things around it, but you were just a super interesting edge case of those were both your games. Like from the outside narrative, we all seriously thought you were doing Double Switch and Vita at the same time, and it was like a rush to the finish line.
Nah. Yeah, Night Trap on Vita was done before I even started Double Switch, because that was finished in, like I said, Night Trap on Vita was finished in, I guess, it was like November of 2017, and then Double Switch I didn't even start until January of 2018.
I think I have like two other like Vita questions, and then I can like shut up about it for I promise at least a month or so. Um, what was the reason for the digital release coming out so much later after everything?
Um, I don't know.
Because I think that was originally supposed to come out the same day as Double Switch in December of 2018, and then it ended up coming out like March of 2019, I think.
I don't even remember the release date for the Vita version.
Was that
Trying to
just like
think
a was
what
that just
happened.
like a thing of like it got like held up in like Sony's like release clearance or like
No, it's I think what happened was I think I tried to time the release around the time people would start getting the physical copy.
oh,
That
okay.
may have what I think that's what I did. I can't remember. That whole time period's just a blur because
Yeah,
so
it
much
came
stuff
out
was going on
it
with
came
that,
out
and then
March
Corpse Killer
5th.
was going on.
Yeah, it came out
Yeah.
March 5th, 2019. Cuz that was the weird thing as well as unfortunately, because people had gotten their copies, like I got mine in January of that year, so it was like 2 months or so before. Then by the time, okay, the game, and we didn't really know what the situation was with the patch. By the time that came out digitally, people were like, okay, maybe it's a different build, or maybe the patch is on that. Was there ever like any like problem from like, did Sony ever come up to you and be like, hey, there's a problem with this game, it technically can't be beat? Like, did anyone at Sony ever kind of come up and be like, hey, why are we selling this game that can't be beat?
No, no, nothing like that ever came up.
I knew the answer. There was just a tiny part of me that was like hoping someone at Sony like would look and care enough, but I kind of understand why.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean they deal with so many games. I
I
mean,
know it would be so like I mean unless the name is literally 5-star free platinum trophy, like they really got to be pushed to like remove something from the store.
yeah. And
Um,
it's like Sony really isn't the type of company that like would contact you and start complaining about stuff. They're more supportive than anything. So it's like if there was like an issue that ever came up and they had to reach out to you, it's not like them slapping you on the wrist or anything like that. It's more like what can we do to, help you out and stuff like that. They're more supportive than anything. I can't say anything negative about Sony at all, honestly.
You are, boy, let me tell you, that is a rare thing to hear from indie devs. That is not usually the narrative, but I know there are still a lot of people out there who try and make it as pleasant of an experience. It's not as awesome and welcoming as like the 2013, 2014 indie celebration PlayStation Loves Indies thing, but it's definitely not the wasteland people try and make it seem online. I do have one question that is not Night Trap related, but is Vita related that people were curious about. Because when all was said and done, people were actually really pleased with how the port turned out, especially after the patch.
Mhm.
Is there any chance in hell you would ever port any of your other games to Vita if the opportunity arose and it seemed financially viable?
No.
I figured, but I had to ask. It was like the one thing that I got asked multiple
Yeah.
times because people were like, "Well, you know what? We can get Double Switch now. We can get Corpse Killer."
Yeah. I mean, it's not, and honestly, it's not even relating to the problems that the Vita version of Night Trap had. It's just the other games, there's more stuff to them and more working parts to it. It's just, it'd be a pain in the ass to even get it to work on a Vita to begin with. So
Yeah.
it's like, I don't want to attempt it.
Hey, one
I think
one is better than most developers did past 2016.
right. I think like Corpse Killer could probably be an easy one to get up and running on a Vita, but Double Switch, no.
Kind of moving away. I want to touch one thing with the Switch version of Night Trap, if you don't mind, because that one you actually, I guess I'm trying to think of the correct word for it, because I know you didn't develop it. It was developed with Mighty Rabbit at Limited Run. How did that process kind of come about? Was it like you were busy with Double Switch, or that like maybe they had a dev kit for the Switch and you didn't? Like, what was the situation that kind of led to them working on the Switch version for Night Trap and Double Switch?
Um, what happened with that was, man, this is a long story. So
I'm sorry, I was thinking, oh,
no,
this will
you're
be the
fine.
easy
You're
one.
fine. No, it's not an easy one. So I tried to get Night Trap on Nintendo Switch around the time it was first announced for PlayStation. There's a contact email that you have to send that you have to use to contact Nintendo to try to get set up as a don't use an online form like Microsoft and Sony does. You have to actually email someone. And then I wasn't getting responses to any of those emails. And then someone on Twitter was like, you have any plans on bringing this to Nintendo Switch? And then just as a joke, I was like, yeah, I'd love to bring it to Nintendo Switch. Do you happen to know anyone that works at Nintendo? Ha ha ha. And then he's like, actually, what you do is you contact this person and this person. And then it was their Twitter accounts. And then I go to their accounts, and at the top, they had a pinned tweet that said, if you're an indie developer interested in releasing your game on Nintendo Switch, just send us a DM.
Oh my god, wait, is this that one guy who recently left Nintendo? He was like the big indie initiative guy? I'm trying to think of his name.
I'm not sure, but
man.
I can't say his name.
No, that's okay, because I think I know exactly what you're talking about. But no, it is funny because most people don't remember this. I mean, it was a couple years ago, but like when the Switch came out in 2017, they weren't handing out dev units left and right. The market for that was very limited. Like they did not want dev kits really getting out there. That's why I remember when the Switch came out, you had 5 games at launch.
Right. But yeah, I contacted one of them on Twitter, and then he was like, yeah, congratulations on the announcement for Night Trap. Looks like it's going to be a huge success, and we'd love to have it on Nintendo Switch. And if possible, we would like to have a multi-platform release as well. Here's my direct email. Send me an email, and I'll introduce you to the team. So I was like, awesome. I'm going to be able to I'm releasing Night Trap on Nintendo Switch. So then I sent the guy an email and just basically continued the conversation to where it left off on Twitter. And at the time, Night Trap still didn't have a release date. It was just still spring 2017. So in the email, I told him the release date that I had in mind, but I had no problems delaying it if it meant I could get it on Nintendo Switch, because they wanted to have a multi-platform.
Oh, I'm sorry. I assumed we're talking post PS4 release. You're talking Switch launch, like post it was announced in 2016.
Right.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So I told him I have no problems delaying the game if it meant I can get on Nintendo Switch. And then I got an email saying, due to the time frames that I'm giving, they're going to have to pass. So I'm like, I don't understand. What time frames? I told you the release date I originally had in mind, but that I would delay the game if it meant I can get it on Nintendo Switch. And then I didn't get a response. So then I sent 2 to 3 emails a week for like a 2-month period. Didn't get a response to any of them. So I was like, okay, I guess Night Trap on Nintendo Switch is dead. Then sorry, I got another Starburst in my mouth trying to swallow it. Yeah, so couple months went by, and then Limited Run got approved to do Nintendo Switch releases. This hadn't been announced yet. And then on Halloween, I'm taking my daughter trick-or-treating, and then I get a DM from Josh, and he's like, hey, we just got approved for doing Nintendo Switch releases. How would you feel about sending us the PlayStation code for Night Trap, and we just port it over to Nintendo Switch for us? I was all like, or we'll port over Nintendo Switch for you. And I was all like, if it means getting on Nintendo Switch, that works for me. Let's do it. So I sent him the code, and then he had one of his developers in their studio ported over Nintendo Switch, and that's how Night Trap happened on Nintendo.
That is so interesting. Did you ever have any motivation to implement some of the features they added? Because I know one of the big features with the Switch version that differentiates it from even PC and PS4 one is it has the Japanese dub, which most people don't know about.
That was something that was supposed to be in the PlayStation 1, actually. The reason it didn't go in there was because Japanese text, like there's certain scenes in the game that don't have Japanese audio, because in the re-release of Night Trap,
the deleted scenes.
Yeah, they don't have Japanese audio, so that's why I didn't put it in there. And then like the French audio doesn't have it either for those scenes, but with those I was able to just put up French subtitles, And then for some reason, Japanese characters weren't displaying correctly. So I was all like, well, it's whatever. I can't see many people trying to play this game in Japanese anyway, so I just let it go.
It's a new
And
kind of
then,
hard mode, playing Night Trap on a different language if it's not your foreign language.
right. And then the only reason the only reason Limited Run put it in there was because all the Japanese audio files, it was already in the code to the game that I sent them, and they just had to set a flag somewhere and then it enabled Japanese audio. So they were like, we're just going to go ahead and put this in there. And I'm like, all right, that's cool, whatever. That's pretty much it, really.
Do you think there's any interest in kind of going back, or at this point would it just kind of be like too late to kind of just patch just to add that back in?
I might add it because after Night Trap got released, there was some, like, if you look at Night Trap compared to Double Switch, there is a huge difference between the two as far as performance and video quality.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And it's because after Night Trap was released, the engine that I was using, they made a lot of updates to the video player to make it run better and all this stuff. So that's why Double Switch is a lot better compared to Night Trap. So when they did that, I was all like, I'm going to release a mega patch for Night Trap where it updates all the video quality. It's going to reduce load times. And then I end up getting a hold of more, like behind the scenes stuff that hasn't been released yet. And I was like, I can stick this in the game now too. So then I came up with the idea of doing a mega patch, which was going to basically upgrade everything in Night Trap. But then as I was doing it, it turned into one of those things where I only work on it when I have time, because with all these games I'm having to do and them being one after another, it's like I don't have time to just sit there and dedicate like a month to getting this thing, fully upgraded. But it might still come one day. It's just, I don't know.
If I could give you a suggestion,
answer.
I'd have no idea like how much production images and stuff or video you have compared to stuff like you did with Double Switch. But I remember I was amazed by how much stuff you guys had for Corpse Killer. That was like,
God, yeah.
I was like, with Corpse Killer, I was like, you guys could have just sold this as an archive, like how Hideo Kojima did with here's a behind the scenes text document for Metal Gear Solid 2, $50 please. So it was so almost overwhelming going through some of that. Like I remember, here's 30 minutes of us just using the miniatures in Corpse Killer, and I'm like, I am enthralled by watching all this, because it's the kind of behind the scenes stuff you never ever get to see, and most people don't ever think people would want to see. Do you think maybe if you did a patch, or maybe if it would incentivize you? I honestly feel like if you feel like you could include enough kind of production materials to just add into the game for anywhere from $5 or whatever as DLC, do you think that might be able to kind of justify it a little better? Because it's not like you're paying for nothing. You're getting all these, for the most part, none of this had ever been seen outside of the 90s documentary from the PC release.
If I was to do it, I would prefer to do it for free, just because I don't want to. I'd feel bad charging people for additional bonus content.
I get that. No, I mean that's the good answer. I just figured I didn't want to just immediately, because I think it's so easy to be all DLC should be free. But I think this is such one of those weird edge cases. You would definitely get a lot of goodwill in terms of hey, video game preservationists, listen up. We just added a whole bunch of stuff to this game from 3 years ago.
Yeah, because the reason this is why Corpse Killer has so much stuff in it. Whatever stuff is available for that game, it's all going in there. I don't cut anything out of it. Some stuff I'll cut, but it's stuff that mainly because it wouldn't be interesting. But for the most part, pretty much anything that I can get a hold of, I'll stick it in the game. But that's why there's so much stuff for Corpse Killer. And then with Night Trap, there wasn't a whole lot. But then Filmworks, they're the guys that owns Double Switch and Corpse Killer. They were going through their storage trying to find stuff, find tapes for other games that were missing. And then they were going through some boxes that hadn't been opened in 25 plus years, and more Night Trap stuff was found, and they didn't even own that game. Because when they bought the rights to the other games in bankruptcy court, all of the stuff for the games, all the physical assets for it, Sega had all of that. So when Sega handed it over to them after the sale, there was stuff in there for other games that were included in that sale, like Night Trap and some other ones.
Is that
So
is
then,
that why the Vita version actually has the cleanest cover of the original '92 release as its cover? Because I
no,
remember, there was a weird thing when the PS4 one came out of like, I know they wanted to redo it because there wasn't a super clean version of that cover that could be kind of blown up.
no, the reason why that happened was because that cover is an actual painting. It's gone. We don't know where it is. The only thing we know about it is that Sega was closing down a warehouse a few years before the Night Trap release came out, and then some random person found the Night Trap painting sitting next to a dumpster, and threw it on eBay, and then it was sold, and then a bunch of fans contacted the person that won the auction and was offering crazy prices for the painting, like double the eBay listing, and he was turning it all down, and then eventually he stopped responding to everyone. But then when the updated cover came out, people liked it, but there was still a few select number of people that hated it for some reason, which I don't know why. I thought it looked pretty cool. Like even Tom thought it was better than the original one. And then
they all have their own individual charm for sure. Like, because I think like the updated one gives me like kind of like a Trauma vibe, whereas the original definitely is like Friday the 13th.
Yeah, like the way the covers come about is like like when I release these games, like this is where basically the 25th anniversary edition tagline came from. Like when I do these games, I try to treat it as if it's like Shout Factory doing like a re-release of an old movie on Blu-ray with like an updated cover and all this stuff.
I think that's the most prominent with Double Switch, because the updated cover for that is my favorite thing that you guys have ever done for updated covers. Like nothing against Corpse Killer, I just think because they have that like super notable cast and just like the iconography of the hotel, it's just like very iconic.
Right. So yeah, that's basically where the approach for the covers come from. But then what happened with Night Trap was, Josh sent me the box art for the Vita version, and I was all, and then the only thing the email said, it just said something along the lines of, they keep asking for the old cover, so here they go, or here you go, and then they just slapped it on there. And the only reason we did it for the Vita version was because we could scan the original one and shrink it down because Vita cases are so small, and it doesn't really lose any quality that way.
Do you have much involvement with the manuals for all of your games, or are those pretty much all handled through limited run?
That's all limited run.
Okay, because I need to find whoever did the Corpse Killer manual in terms of filling it up, because it's not a manual. It's just a behind the scenes booklet. It's like the coolest thing like I've ever seen. With all the production, like it's like the best you're going to get in terms of getting a basically like a coffee table book in manual form.
There's even there's behind the scenes stuff that I forgot to put in Corpse Killer. There's even more. Because like if you go to that photo gallery section in the game, like when I got all the production images, there was like 1,500 of them.
What is what's your like favorite kind of stuff? Like for me, when it comes to behind the scenes, I'm like a huge sucker for, if I can't get like a behind the scenes like documentary like they do with a lot of like old, like the old Alien documentaries and stuff like that did a lot of more 80s movies, like directors' commentaries and stuff like that are like basically like my weakness. Like what's like the big ones for you where you feel really like vindicated being able to add this to the game?
I think personally with the games that I've done so far, it's the stuff that I haven't put in there, which is emails from the 90s. I think that's the most interesting stuff, because like once Digital Pictures got up and running and became a full-blown video game studio, that's when they got really hardcore with documenting everything that they were doing. Like they had an on-set photographer, and then they had someone filming everything on set also. But there's a lot of documents that I don't stick in the games because they don't necessarily fit with the games. It's more like technical behind the scenes stuff. Like there was like they have like I have copies of emails that they sent back and forth, and then copies of contracts for the games that were written back then, and then even message board posts because they used like Digital Pictures. They communicated with each other in the company by using an AOL message board that was private. So I have a lot of those comments as well.
How do you save that? Was someone just like screen printing those? Like can you convert those to like a text file? Like how do you archive that? I can't even imagine.
They just saved them all in text documents. And then
God.
like there was one that I found very interesting, for example, was basically how Digital Pictures got started. When the Sega
post Hasbro, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when there was an email I have where it basically picture started, which was they approached Sega with the idea of bringing full motion video to Sega CD. Sega actually didn't think it was possible to put video on Sega CD. Well, Digital Pictures made a deal with them saying, if we can get video up and running on a Sega CD within 60 days, then you fund our first game. Well, Digital Pictures did it in 2 weeks.
Oh my God, that is so.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. Like I wouldn't even think about that. Like I don't even know how you ever like have like time to peel yourself away from that. I feel like I could just like spend a whole day just like going through archives like that and like lose myself.
Yeah. Scripts is another one I get stuck in too, because the game I'm working on now, there is so many different script revisions, and it's interesting to see what the game originally started out as and then what it became. So you learn a lot of stuff with that too.
Because I haven't actually put as much time into Double Switch as I have Night Trap and Corpse Killer. Did you start? I know. Did you do the scripts with Double Switch, or did that start with Corpse Killer?
Corpse Killer.
Okay.
Like Double Switch didn't really have a lot of bonus stuff. I guess you could say.
And that's a lot harder as well, especially like getting a script. Because I mean, I've seen the pictures you guys post of the script of Night Trap, and that's like a multi-layered like Bible in terms of what's happening when it's like really you have to do it as a timeline because of the way all the cameras work. But
right.
I wanted to say actually I can't believe I didn't praise this sooner for it. Having the different revisions of the script and just the full thing, because I kind of thought, oh, you're gonna put the like cover and maybe a page or two, but like you had the like 80 plus, like I think there was like 2 or 3 different revisions in Corpse Killer, and having the actual physical, I think it was like the 7th or something draft in the collector's edition as a printed book is like even cooler.
Yeah, I wanted to do that with Night Trap too, but Limited Run said no.
Well, now I will say at least I don't know what the other reception to it has been, but yeah, Corpse Killer was the game I knew the least about before playing it, and then I basically just sat myself down for a weekend and was like, wow, like it was actually really funny. The first thing I thought after I finally was playing it for a while, I was like, wow, now I know why the Angry Video Game Nerd was mad his copy didn't work. Because there's so much to say about that game. It's like, it's not the best light gun game ever, but for
it's not
release 93, 94?
I think it was 93, yeah.
Yeah, like for that release, like it's like its structure of like picking your missions and going over the different like document files. Like I kept going back and finding Let's Plays on YouTube while I was playing it, because I remember after your first couple missions, when you have all the text squares pop up where you can watch a video file or go over like a description of like what this is or what this item like comes from, or them just talking about stuff, even if it's just like, oh, like his Hummer or whatever, and then being like, oh, there's no way this was in like the Sega CD version, and it's all there. Like so much of it like looks like it was just like something made now, and just was, my brain couldn't like wrap around that someone designed this in 1992.
Yeah. Like Corpse Killer, probably out of all the games so far, Corpse Killer probably got the most changes in it, because like when I try to do these, I try to make them as accurate as possible to the original, but if there's something that doesn't make sense to me, then I'll try to fix it. Like with Night Trap, for example, there was a part in the game, like there's 3 different parts in Night Trap where the game will check and see how many augers you've captured and how many you missed, and you have to have a certain average in order to progress further, or else you get a game over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with we were trying to, like, during when I was working on the game, we were trying to figure out what those exact requirements were in the original. And what we figured out is that if you got the lowest amount required for the first checkpoint and got past that, then if you caught every single auger after that, it still wouldn't be enough to make it past the second checkpoint. So it was like, okay, let's just simplify it and make it to where you have to have at least 75% captured in order to progress. So stuff like that, like minor stuff like that, was changed.
Interesting. Because because for the longest time, even though I had the PS4 version for years, I never knew how to unlock deleted scene number 3, because that one's such a weird trigger of you have to have like over 50, but you can't get close to 70, or else like they won't notice and like the auger doesn't come up. Like, so like, was that kind of like weird incorporating the like, there's no like hard rules of like here's the number that you need, and like especially for the deleted scenes of like, did you just have to go back and like ask whoever you could from the original production and be like, where were you going to put this? Like, what am I going to do with this extra footage?
No, because the way I got the footage was when they sent me the footage, it was 4 video files. Just 4 long
so
video
it is
files.
only 4 deleted scenes. There's not like extra ones that you could have like. Because in my head it was like, okay, these are the 4 you added that kind of made sense.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like anything else extra.
Right. Yeah. There was just 4 deleted scenes and that's it. But when they sent me the video footage, it was 4 video files and that's it of the entire game. To where when you took those 4 videos and lined them up, all the scenes lined up exactly where they went in the game. Huh. And then with that scene specifically, where you have to have the specific conditions to where the parents arrive and then they cut you off and all that stuff. That scene isn't in the original, but what happened instead is that Commander Sims would just pop up and yell at you for missing too many and then cut you off. So it was easy to figure out where that one went.
Interesting, because one of the interesting little weird things
like,
that get
it
called
works
out.
It works the same way as the original game did on that part. It's just presented in a different way, basically.
Yeah, and it's kind of like giving it more context. But like, one of the weird things, and I'm surprised I never brought this up, that I always see brought up by like the really hard, like if you're complaining about this, you're a really hardcore Sega CD fan from back in the day about Night Trap, is all the people who want the old, well, I guess actually the new footage they recorded with the like Sega controller. Like, was there ever a chance you guys had the ability to include that, or was it just like basically cut it out, or Sega had all of the old footage?
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to do that because you can't have hardware from other companies on a different one. So like, you can't show like a Sega controller on a PlayStation game or an Xbox controller on a Sony game. It's like that with all consoles. So putting in the Sega footage didn't even have that option because of that. And then the other thing was we didn't have the higher quality footage of those scenes. It didn't exist.
Oh yeah, that's one of the more interesting things of it. I would have loved to have seen the production, like behind the scene productions for when they had to get the scat team back, just for the weird interlude stuff where they changed the controllers, and because all of that's pretty much filmed in like their van or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah, that must have been the weirdest call from all of their agents. Hey, you guys remember that movie we did like 5 years ago that never came out? You guys were like,
right.
You guys want to just do that again? We got to film like 30 minutes of footage.
Yeah, that's actually something I got a hold of after the game came out. Was I have the actual shopping list that someone wrote to try to buy all the materials to recreate the scat team uniforms for when they did the
for when they refilmed it. How did you?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
I'm surprised that even exists, like a shopping list.
I mean, honestly, you kind of shot your wad once you've like told me you still have AOL chat logs. At that point, I'll believe you. You'll have like napkins from people's productions meeting at that point.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what all I got. That this is just for Night Trap. I got that stuff, and then I have all of the original Polaroids that were taken at the Sega reshoots.
Oh yeah, those were included in the Vita Collector's Edition, right?
Yeah. They were reproduced. I got all those original ones. I got the actual cassette tape from the studio that the theme song was recorded at.
One day, I'm sure, before this lady dies, we'll find out who actually sung that. I can't
Yeah.
believe no one still knows, because it's like, because the like whatever like fake name for it is like Sunny and something, right?
Sunny blue skies.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
one day
Such
that lady's gonna be like the Titanic scene. She's on her deathbed and she'll like tell her granddaughter, and people will be like, oh, it makes sense now.
Right. But trying to think what else I got. I do have a behind the scenes video of seeing the crime now,
Really? So like of the
but there's no
filming of it?
audio. Yeah, it's the filming of it, but there's no audio.
God, because that would have been filmed 87, probably?
86.
Gee, yeah, because, wow. Honestly, I'm amazed how well that looks for the 25th anniversary version of it. And actually, even going back to when you were saying how going from the PlayStation version to the Switch, how parts of it look better, it's really funny. I honestly, my favorite way to watch it is through the Switch Collector's Edition's VHS tape. Because like that, I feel I don't know if it's just like my eyes playing tricks on me, but I feel like the video quality on the VHS tape and the consistency of how it plays, like I feel like it looks better through a VHS tape.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Also, I don't know, like I even know what that was like. What was it like cutting a VHS tape? Like, did you just do the digital file and like, because you basically made your own canon version of Night Trap where the bad ending is the ending.
Yeah, it was like the way that came about was I thought of it before the PlayStation 1 and then before the PlayStation release. And then I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to attempt something like that. That's going to be a pain in the ass. And then kind of forgot about it. And then once the Nintendo Switch version came up, I'm at a arcade with a friend and I'm talking to him about the Switch stuff. And he was all like, what about doing like a Night Trap movie? And I was like, what do you mean? He's all like, take all the footage and cut it into a movie. And I was all like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
So
like
then,
like if 100,000 people watch it on YouTube, I'm sure at least 2,000 people would want it on a VHS tape.
right. So then I emailed Josh about it and I was like, what do you think of doing like a Night Trap movie? And he was all like, dude, that's perfect. Can you get it to us in time? We'll get it manufactured. I'll start getting prices on VHS tapes. And I'm like, no, don't do it on VHS. Do it on Blu-ray. So, and then he's all like, no, let's do it on VHS. So that way we make people have to actually put in the work to be able to watch it. And plus it fits because it's 80s. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Let's do VHS.
His thing did work. I
Yeah.
had to go through 4 different VHS players till I finally found one that worked. All 3 at
Right.
my house I found out were basically fried. I had to do it at my work. For whatever reason, my work's very, very sad, like, employee lounge has a VHS tape in the TV. So imagine me on, like, an hour lunch break, spending my time just eating lunch in, like, a public setting, watching Night Trap as a movie, and people just walking by being like, what is this? And I just be like, oh, it's
Right.
just a little, like, it's just, like, a little, like, 80s flick no one's ever heard of.
Right. And then as far as the ending goes, with it being the bad ending, that's pretty much a no-brainer because if you watch horror films, especially from the 80s, they all have a bad ending. So it made sense. And then so that was part of it. And then the other part was I was purposely trying to avoid having scenes in the movie version to where Kelly will start talking to the player. And that's what she does in all the good endings.
Oh, yeah, you're right. And honestly, it even goes back to it, like, they even knew back then that the best way, like, when you get 100%, the best ending is to capture Kelly. Like, that's the most
Right.
satisfying thing ever when you're done. Of like, no one's going to get all 100 OGs and then be like, you wouldn't. It'd be like, don't worry, Kelly, you got this, you're good. There's no punishment. Of course I'm going to capture you. Why would I not capture you?
Yeah. I feel like if you watch a movie and then one of the characters looks at the screen and starts talking to you, it kind of ruins the experience. So it's like I tried to take it and make it like tried to format it as if it was an actual movie. So that's why I cut all those out. I think there was like one scene where it was pretty much avoidable, but other than that, I was happy with it.
Do you have any like aspirations or like other formats you'd want to get it to? Because obviously it'd be infinitely cheaper to like make a couple like DVD copies if you wanted, or even Blu-rays. Obviously would be more expensive, but be a lot more financially viable than tracking down a bunch of VHS tapes.
Like, do I have any interest of like releasing Night Trap in different formats?
No, no, no. Like your VHS cut you did, how you originally wanted to do it on Blu-ray.
Oh,
Like, do you have any other like? Oh, I would like to get it on another format someday.
um, if like the PlayStation patch I was talking about earlier, if I was like that was going to include the movies, that way everyone that had the game could watch it finally. But other than that, that's pretty much it, really. I
Okay.
don't think I don't think there would be a market for buying Night Trap the movie on DVD or Blu-ray or something like that.
Now that's when you go pitch to Shout Factory. Just pitch it as the most obscure '80s movie ever, and then see
Right.
see if they'll be willing to do it.
Yeah, it's like I don't have like the capabilities of pushing something like that to where it reaches as many people as possible. Like, I mean, same thing can be said for the games I do, but I have the Sony YouTube channel that I can at least post a trailer on. If I was to do like a movie version of Night Trap, then I'm not going to have something like that available.
You know what? Speaking of the reach of Night Trap, if I recall, you had a self-imposed bet when the Switch version came up. That if the Switch version sold like over 10,000 copies, was it? You would get a Night Trap tattoo?
If it hit 20,000 copies, I would do it.
Oh, yeah, it got, what was it, like 13, I think?
Hit 15.
Oh, yeah, that was, I was amazed at how well that did on Switch. But I mean, I think you guys kind of struck gold by the teaser reveal of that being the Senate hearing footage of Howard Lincoln being like, it's never coming to Nintendo. And then being like, oh,
Dude, I had an idea for the trailer, and then Limited Run was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. We just got on board with Nintendo, so maybe we should do that. But I was originally going to have the trailer show the clip of the Senate hearing where he says Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo console, but then have it do like a rewind effect and then play it again, but it would be like an edited version where he says Night Trap will appear on a Nintendo console. And then Josh was like, maybe we shouldn't do that.
I'm amazed that it, unless someone has just never bragged about it or took a picture, I hope someone out there at some point has gotten their Nintendo Switch copy of Night Trap signed by Howard Lincoln. You've got to imagine someone's thought about bringing it up to him, because he's like made the round at like retro conventions recently.
Tom Zito mailed him a copy.
He did, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm assuming he
I
did
don't.
not hear back.
No, he didn't hear back.
Man, that's one of those things that I bet he probably doesn't even remember that he even said that, just because it was like no one actually didn't like no one thought it was that personal of it back then. They were
Yeah.
using it because it was the thing.
Yeah, that whole situation was stupid. It's like there isn't anything bad in Night Trap. It's like I kind of looked at it as like the urban legend of gaming, to where it has this big crazy story behind it, and then over the years it kind of got this reputation where people's like, oh, it has this in that game and it has that in that game, when really it doesn't. But it's incredibly tame. Like, it was only part of that whole Senate hearing, because that whole Senate hearing, when you watch it, it's basically the 16-bit console wars happening in a courtroom. And then it's like, it's basically Sega and Nintendo taking turns taking cheap shots at each other. It's like Nintendo's like, oh, well, Sega has this on their system, and then they pull out the gun for that game, Lethal Enforcers, and then
yeah.
Sega's like, oh, well, Nintendo has this, and then they pull out the giant bazooka, the Super Scope 6. So it's just them taking jabs at each other back and forth, trying to outdo the other, and then Night Trap got thrown in there.
So, kind of going back, I'm gonna start trying to wrap up. I promise. I cannot believe how long.
Oh, you're cool.
Okay, just because I originally started this at like around 8 o'clock when you messaged me, and I told my girlfriend, who like got off work at 8, like I'd be like, you know what? There's no chance I'll still be talking by like 2 hours from now, so you're good. There's no chance he's gonna like not tell me to shut up by then. So I'm
take as much time as you want. I honestly don't care. These
right.
I enjoy doing these. They're fun.
No, thank you so much, because like I'm learning like so much about it, and it will be great to put out there for even like all the people, at least just on the Facebook group alone, who like Night Trap, in the sense of like there are people out there who still care about this. Like, it's not just you and me sitting out there in a corner.
Right.
So you start working on Double Switch I assume at that point you would just kind of targeted the platforms and you kind of narrowed the scope of, okay, I'm just going to do PS4, just PC. Like, what was the kind of takeaways of, all right, I finished Night Trap, what do I want to put into Double Switch that I learned from that process?
Um, Double Switch is basically Night Trap Part 2. It's like a
Yes.
spiritual sequel.
It's kind of
I
weird how they just didn't call it Night Trap 2. That's how much it is like.
Right. So I kind of treated it the same way as far as development goes. I just basically I took what I learned from Night Trap and tried to improve on everything, because that's how Digital Pictures did their games too. Like, if you look at all their games, they basically made the same game twice every time, because like they have Night Trap, then you have Double Switch, which is an improved version of Night Trap. Then they did Ground Zero Texas. Then they did Corpse Killer, which Corpse Killer is an improved version of Ground Zero Texas. Then they did Prize Fighter. Then they did Supreme Warrior, which is an improved version of Prize Fighter. So that was kind of the approach I took with Double Switch. It was basically taking what I did in Night Trap and trying to improve on it somehow.
I'm trying to think going into it. So with Double Switch for it, I'm assuming like whatever contracts that all the actors kind of did at the time, whatever like with unions and stuff. So just everything rights-wise is just all with Flash Filmworks. There wasn't anything you guys kind of had to do with any of the like, because that was the first one that had multiple, even like at the time, bigger name actors in it.
Yeah, they have the way that was done was because I've been asked this before, like, do actors get royalties on any of these games and stuff like that? And
Usually
they don't.
no.
Right. The reason being was because what they did was, when they did these games, since they were considered a movie production, so they actually had to go through the Screen Actors Guild and pay basically a one-time fee to hire the actors to appear on these.
Oh,
So
because I think
yeah.
isn't one of the things I recall Josh might have had, or you might have tweeted at the time for leading up to Double Switch, you actually had the SAG release films of everyone's signatures, right?
Yeah. We Flash Filmworks still had a lot of that stuff. So they digitized everything so they can have backups of everything. But then all the stuff that they have for all these games, it was just taking up so much room in storage. So Flash Films was like, why don't we just give this stuff away with all the collector's editions? So that's where that came about. And then
okay, because I was wondering like how they were okay with giving away like all of these thousands of production stills and like extra like, so they just had all this just taking up space and it wasn't going anywhere.
Right. And it's like, I mean, to a visual effects studio that works on major Hollywood motion pictures, like, that isn't like a big deal to them versus a gamer who is a fan of the game and then gets a copy of like a timesheet with all the actors' signatures. That's cool to a gamer that's a fan of the game, but to a visual, like a film studio, it's like, it's whatever. So
okay,
the only thing they're concerned about is like basically
when you get this sent to you, you of course have first dibs. You just go through and get whatever you want and then you give it away to everybody, right?
No, I don't get any of them. Like, well, I get some. Like, what they'll do is, Flash Filmworks, they'll mail them to Limited Run directly, and then
okay.
and then they send me a couple things too. Like with Double Switch, they sent me. What did they send me? They sent me the actual timelines that Digital Pictures created, like their flow charts of the entire game. So I got all of those. I think there was like 3 different versions, and I got all 3 of them. And then they sent me some production images. And then I got 2 timesheets because there wasn't any timesheets that had every single actor's signature on it. So they sent me 2 of them so that way I could have all of them. Because, like, I have one where, like, there's one I have, for example, that's missing Corey Haim's signature, but it has Debbie Harry's and Arlie Ermey's on it. But then the other one has Corey Haim's signature, but it's missing Debbie Harry and Arlie Ermey. So they sent me 2 of them so that way I could have all of them. And then after that, they send whatever else to Limited Run, and then Limited Run includes them all with the orders.
That's awesome.
And then the same thing happened with Corpse Killer too. Like with Corpse Killer,
Corpse Killer had a
like I
ton.
don't.
Like I remember when they got that box in from Flash Filmworks of just like, here's a bunch of PC versions, 3DO games, like all these things that like I'm sure like if someone just like took a day on eBay, they could like have made pretty easy money by selling these mint sealed 3DO like and like PC games, but the fact that they were just kind of given away was so cool.
Yeah, and then with Corpse Killer, they sent me I got the VHS tape. It was a behind the scenes video that
Oh,
Digital Pictures made.
you actually uploaded
Which
that to YouTube, right?
yes,
Thank you, by the way, so much because watching that was such a trip. Because if
I
you,
loved that they sent me that because I had that tape when I was a kid.
because if you weren't around the '90s, you would just randomly get stuff mailed to you if you were on a random mailing list. Because I remember like you would get stuff from like Nintendo and Sony would sometimes do it, but yeah, like like Sega companies, and I had never ever in a million years thought that Digital Pictures did one because that probably would have come out. What, 95, 96?
Yeah, it would have been like 94, 95. Like I remember the way you had to get it originally was they had an ad in an issue of Game Pro, and if you called a phone number, they mailed you the tape for free, and that's how I had it originally, and then it disappeared over the years. And then when Flash Filmworks was mailing me stuff for Corpse Killer, they're like, "You want a Digital Pictures VHS tape?" And I'm like, "Hell yes, I do. I loved that movie when I was a kid." So they sent me that, and then I got a box with like 600 slides, and I'm like, "What the hell am I going to do with all of these?" So they're just sitting there, and then I got a signature, like a timesheet again for that one, but it only had two of the actors on it, which was one for the guy that played Winston and one that played the girl Julie. And then they sent me, what else did I get? This was something that was found after the game was released. They found matte paintings of all the different levels. They were concept art. So I got two of those matte paintings.
I
then the
assume
rest,
those are either extremely big or way smaller than I would bet.
they're small, but they're really long. I would
Yeah.
say,
Like honestly, I didn't. I had seen gameplay of Corpse Killer before, but until I saw the behind the scenes in motion, you really can't tell unless you really blow it up that it's just a painting, which is pretty incredible.
yeah, like the matte paintings I got, I think they're like, I want to say they're about 2 feet long. Yeah, that sounds about right. But yeah, I got that, and then they sent me a sealed copy of the PC and 3DO versions, and then everything else went out with the collector's editions.
That's so crazy. There's something I was gonna ask about Corpse Killer. Yeah, I don't know how I've not asked this. So I think it's actually fair to say you did the most crazy thing, at least with all of your 3 games so far, with Corpse Killer, of you just straight up just made a new mission that was never in the game with that.
I actually didn't do that. Flash Filmworks did.
Well, okay, so I didn't know that because like pretty much if you look at the credits, it's kind of like the same in most of your stuff. What is the story behind the 3D level? Because when I saw do the secret mission, I'm like okay, and then by the time I got to it, I was very surprised. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, it was so when Corpse Killer first came up with doing that, Flash Filmworks, they wanted to create new levels and add more to the game. And then they created that one, and that was it, and created a few different enemies to go along with it. And then once I started working on the game, I was like, how the fuck am I going to fit this level in the game, but put it in there in a way that it makes sense? So then the idea of a bonus level came up. So I just stuck that level in there as a bonus level, and then the enemies like Flash Filmworks didn't create attack animations for any of those enemies they created. So I just gave them a ridiculous amount of hit points to where if you kill one, you'll get a whole bunch of data points that you could spend in the bonus section. And then with the music, that song's actually a deleted track that didn't end up in the original game.
Oh yeah, because one of the other interesting things with Corpse Killer is it has a completely unused soundtrack. So like,
I didn't even know that originally. The way that came up was with Double Switch and Night Trap. When I got the video footage, the way the the audio was set up was it would have the dialogue on one channel and then the music was on the other channel. So they were separated. Well, when I got the video for Corpse Killer, it wasn't like that. And then I want to say about a month before the game was announced, I had to start making the trailer. So I contacted Flash Filmworks and I'm like, hey, I'm having problems cutting a trailer because I don't have separated audio with this like the other games did. And then they actually had an ADAT tape from a studio. They didn't know what was on it. They just knew it had audio file. Like they just knew it had audio in it for the game. So they took it to a recording studio, got it digitized, and then sent it to me. And it was like 24 different tracks of audio. So then I started going through it, found a song, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I don't remember this from the game. So then I slowly started muting tracks and then enabling some other tracks. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is like an entire soundtrack that was made for the game that didn't get used. So yeah, that's how I found an alternate soundtrack to it. Didn't even know it existed.
And do we have like a credited composer to the unused one?
Nope, have no idea who did it.
That's my only guess when I was playing through it and thinking about it at the time was when it was originally Project Manpower, they probably got like that was like the test audio, and then maybe towards the end of like production when it was Corpse Killer, they were like, because the tone is very different between the both soundtracks.
Yeah, I think it originally like the game was originally going to be called Project Manpower, and it kind of had a more serious tone to it. And then as they were working on it, it kind of shifted, I guess. And then when you go back and play it with that alternate soundtrack, it's cool, but it doesn't necessarily fit, I guess, the tone of the game. So I guess at some point they were like, maybe we should redo the soundtrack, because like even like they probably tried to. I think another thing is that they were trying to gear it more towards like something like a movie studio production. Because if you listen to that original sound, like if you listen to the main soundtrack that everyone knows, it's like, you know, full-blown orchestral scores and stuff like that. But then when you listen to that other soundtrack, it's basically MIDI, and it's very low quality compared to it. So I think they were just trying to go for a more serious tone with it, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know why the unused soundtrack reminded me of this, but one of the, if you guys have not seen it, the coolest bonus features for Corpse Killer is the pitch ideas for Corpse Killer 2 and all the different ideas they were going to do, because I had no idea that they were, like, because like, they actually, at least in terms of pre-production, they got kind of far. Like, they had multiple drafts and multiple revisions of, like, ideas they wanted to do, like, ranging from, like, going to a bayou and stuff like that. And me reading these, I'm like, this would be so cool, because like you could take the idea of like Corpse Killer and definitely flesh it out into a longer, because they even said it in the sequel idea pitches. They were like, take the idea of, because like I think what happened was they filmed it all, and then they probably, while trying to make the game, were like, okay, we're kind of limited because of our footage, what we could do with the gameplay type. And then if they took all of that knowledge of, here's the gameplay we can do with the missions and going around the island, you could have a lot more footage when you plan that out ahead of time.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think I'm a couple years early on that maybe ever happening. Do not think Corpse Killer 2's in the pipeline anywhere.
Nah, I don't think it is.
That's really crazy though that Flash Filmworks is the one that kind of did that, because when I saw the bonus level happen with all the different actors, I just figured you were like, oh hey, let's just get a green screen and just mocap a bunch of my buddies in the game.
Nah, all the different I think most of the enemies on that bonus level are CGI, but there's 2 of them where I think they are actual Flash Filmwork employees. And then they sent me that, and they were like, can you stick this guy in the game? And I'm just like, what the hell?
Yeah, like, that's got to be so weird for you to be like, what? Because, like, did they, I guess, make the 3D stage? Because it's also a 3D stage, which makes it so jarring.
Yeah, they made that too.
That is... You know what? I'm gonna make a bold proclamation. I don't think they're putting Corpse Killer's 3D animation on their IMDb page anytime soon. But that is the weirdest thing I bet that studio did in all of 2018.
It probably is. But yeah, it's definitely on their IMDb pages.
Oh man, that's so
I get
funny.
worried about I get worried about that sometimes because
Oh, like leaking it and stuff?
yeah, because the like the people at Flash Filmworks, they had to do stuff on Corpse Killer. They had it listed on their IMDb pages before the game was even announced, and I was freaking out about that for a minute.
That's so weird. Okay, so
But then the game ended up leaking anyway. That's a whole other story.
really, because I remember when that got announced at E3. When did it leak before E3?
It was about 6 hours before it was announced.
What?
Some random person on Twitter that was posting E3 leaks all week posted Corpse Killer 25th Anniversary Edition getting announced at E3.
I'm trying to think how that would even, because at that point the only people theoretically who would know it would be you, Flash Filmworks people, and Limited Run.
Right. Yeah, and they didn't leak it, but I have no idea who did, but they obviously had some sort of source that's in the industry because this person was leaking stuff about E3 all week. Like pretty much everything that was announced at the last E3, it appeared on this person's Twitter page before it was officially announced.
Man,
And it wasn't just Corpse Killer, it was everything.
it was
And then
Keanu Reeves and Corpse Killer, the two highlights of E3 2019.
right. And it's just like, I saw it and I was all like, what the hell? How is this? It's like, it bugged me at first, but then after a while, I'm all like, well, I mean, look at it this way. At least they looked at Corpse Killer as important enough to where they felt they needed to leak
I'm
it.
glad you said that, because I'm going to be real with you. If you lost your moment of like Twitter fame for 6 hours, at least you were important enough for that someone thought, I gotta leak this. Someone needs to know
Right.
Corpse Killer's coming. Like if it was like
Right.
3 months GDC, something like that, and then it was just kind of festering, I would definitely get you. But like, I think for the mainstream, like people like me who did have their ear to the ground for that, I had no idea that leaked before the press conference.
Yeah. And then at the same time, it's like when you leak something like Corpse Killer is getting announced for E3, people's going to be like, oh, whatever. That game ain't getting announced. And then it's just funny to me.
So, I gotta say, that was the weirdest announcement at Limited Runs, and at least for me personally, when that got announced, that was such a weird one of like, okay, I really want another game, like I wanted to play your other game, but that was in like that weird middle ground of we hadn't really heard anything about the Vita patch in a while, but hey, in like 2 months, buy that guy's next game. I remember that was like a big sour spot for a lot of people of like, okay, it's been very radio silent for a lot of people, and then they're just kind of saying, "Oh, buy the next game." Because I mean, if you're just looking at the Screaming Villains like Twitter account, it's pretty much lead up to Corpse Killer, nothing before Double Switch, and even then, it's kind of been like DOA.
Yeah, I basically just post announcements on there and that's it. I'm not one of those guys that has to that goes on Twitter and just constantly posts stuff about their game nonstop throughout the hours because it's like social media is like a black hole that you can get easily sucked into. So I try to get on there only when I really need to, which is basically announcements, and that's about it.
Can I make one suggestion for your personal Twitter?
Delete it.
No, better. Your last major tweet that if I remember correctly, was you like gushing about Resident Evil 2 remake in 2019. When
Oh, I love that game.
When Resident Evil 3 comes out, I just want you to get like a tweet-sized review that just says whatever you think about Resident Evil 3. Don't ever use it again if you don't feel like you need to. But just only say, "Oh, okay, Resident Evil 3 just as good as Resident Evil 2." Just
I
because
have no idea what to expect from Resident Evil 3 because that was one of the ones I skipped.
I think honestly, a lot of people are going to be surprised how good that is because I think they're going to take a lot of the lessons from 2, and that dev team is smart, and a lot of people don't know that 2 and 3 were worked on at the same time. They did not wait till 2019 and went, should we do 3? All right, let's pump it out in a year and do 3. Like they've been working on that for like over 4 years. So like that team, they know what they're doing, and the fact that they killed 7, they've killed RE2 remake, like they could give me anything. They could give me Corpse Killer 2 and I'd be excited. I trust the team with anything.
Resident Evil 3 I'm pretty stoked on just because I don't know what to expect from it because like when that game came out, when I first played it, it was like I know it takes place in the same place as part 2, And I think that's kind of why I didn't get into it, because to me, I just looked at it as the same game, which it obviously isn't. But at that point, I was also losing interest in Resident Evil. So, like, with the remake of Part 2, it's pretty much the exact same thing as the original one, but there's some minor changes as adjustments throughout the game. But with 3, they already said that one has a lot of changes compared to 2.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm pretty stoked on that one, because it's going to be like a whole new game.
Like, how did you feel about Mr. X?
God, that gave me really bad anxiety.
From everything they've talked about, and even just remembering what the original's like, Nemesis makes Mr. X look like a licker. He is in a totally different league, and the fact that they've said he will track you through the city, which was kind of one of the things of it was not very believable, but obviously in terms of the game logic, how it worked, of once you got out of the sewer or got out of the police department, that little inner ground of okay, you're kind of safe. He would kind of chase you, but there was those moments where you knew you were out of his grasp, whereas 3 is sounding much more no, he's just gonna chase you the whole time, and you can't kill him.
Right.
You can only down him, and it's gonna be a nightmare for 8 hours.
Yeah, what's funny is with the gaming industry, it's a very stressful thing to be involved with. And it did get to me to the point where I had to get prescribed anxiety medication for it, because it was too much at once.
Well, and I mean, especially from a one-man dev team, who you are also doing your own. You're doing your own PR. You're doing your own publishing. You're not handing off that much outside of when people Limited Run are doing the physical side of things.
Right. It was basically just too much at once, and then I was going in and out of the doctor's office, and they're like, "We're going to put you on this and see if that helps." And then I didn't like it, and then eventually I stopped taking it. And then once I started playing Resident Evil 2, I got those fuckers back out and started taking them again, because that game stressed me out so bad.
I'm the biggest masochist with horror, whether it be movies or games. I just love all the different kind of genres and stuff from it, whether it be Eastern or Western type. My biggest thing I always do is, whenever a new horror thing comes out that I really want to soak into, get as dark a room as possible, put on really, really good surround sound headphones, and just piss myself. I remember the first day PT came out, before anyone knew what that was, I did the same thing for PT. Each loop of that hallway took me 20 minutes, because I was so terrified, because you didn't know what was going to happen.
I never got to play PT.
I'll tell you this right now, it is very it is thankfully still possible to get it without doing illegal stuff to your PS4. You wouldn't have to break it. There are ways to trick the server into letting you download it. It's a big pain in the butt, but if you ever get the chance to experience it, it still holds up even after all these years.
Yeah, I remember when it got announced, it was just called PT, and then I didn't really pay much attention to it. And then eventually everyone learned it was a demo for Silent Hill, and then by the time I learned that, it was taken down, so I never got to play it.
I guess kind of wrapping up with a little bit of stuff. I'm surprised actually I never brought this up. Night Trap on Vita and Night Trap on PS4 have actually been your only limited number sales. Oh yeah, did I lose you again?
Oh, okay. It cut out for a second. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So besides Night Trap on PS4 and Vita, everything else you've done recently has been open pre-order for Switch, Double Switch, Night Trap Switch, and Corpse Killer. What is your what's been your reception to seeing those? Because honestly, I follow the limited print market for all the different companies. I feel like I could not guess with a whole day ahead of me of how Corpse Killer could do, because I have no idea how to gauge what that fandom is for a month-long pre-order.
Yeah, it's I actually prefer the pre-order system, only because one, I'm not getting death threats, and two, it gives everyone an opportunity to get the game if they really do want it, to where it's not like Night Trap where it's you got to get in and get it as quickly as possible. So I like that part of it. But even with pre-orders, the numbers have been actually really good. I mean, obviously they're not going to do Night Trap numbers, because let's face it, Night Trap is the most well-known game Digital Pictures did, other than Sewer Shark. And the other games don't have the crazy backstory that Night Trap has. So with Night Trap and Double Switch In Corpse Killer, I'm trying to think what they did exactly. I know Corpse Killer did 5,000 copies.
Oh wow. I'm
Um,
assuming that includes the like 2 or 3,000 from the CE, or is that just standard?
it's everything combined. The
Okay.
collector's edition, there was 1,500 of them, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so yeah, Corpse Killer did like 5,000, and then Double Switch on PlayStation, I think it did 4,000, and then the Nintendo Switch version did five.
That's really interesting for it, yeah, because it's so funny how connected they all are, even though they're all from the same studio, but their lineages are like so different.
Right, exactly.
So your relationship, from the way you've talked about it with Flash Film, and I guess are you still working with anyone else with like any of the other old like companies that might still have rights to digital pictures, or is it pretty much you're just working with Flash Film at the moment?
It's Flash Film and Tom, because Flash Film owns half the games, actually more than half. They own like three-fourths of them, and then Tom owns a couple other than Night Trap. Like, so yeah, I'm going to be working with both of those for quite a while, because like I don't think it's a big secret at this point, but pretty much all the digital picture games are going to get re-released eventually. It's just the big mystery behind it is which one's coming next.
Don't make me get my hopes up again for Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch make my video.
I will go ahead and clear this up now. Marky Mark will not happen.
Okay. All right. Just
Like,
saying, because you said everything. My mind
yeah,
immediately went to make my video.
yeah, the Make My Video series, Tom does own it, but the problem is licensing music.
It's such
And
a pain.
yeah, it's like I don't want to deal with that headache, and at the same time, I don't think a game like that could work today, because when you have games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero who are constantly releasing new music every week, I think music games need to follow that format. And I don't think there's any interest in people wanting to purchase music for a video editor named towards kids.
I feel like the only way this would work, and this would pretty much only limit it to PC, is if you made blank Make My Video, where you
Right.
basically just make the worst video editor for kids and make it like an open source thing people can like buy or whatever for, and just like have all the crazy bad filters and the gradients, and they can just put whatever video files and music on there.
Right, exactly. It's just like, in order to like, the only way Make My Video would work is like you would have to have the option to where people can download additional songs to put in the game, and then on top of that, you would have to take, like, there was 4 Make My Video games. You would have to combine, like, each one only had 3 songs, and that was it. So you would have to combine all of those games into one game, which is only 12 songs, and then you would still need to add like 50 more other than that.
If
Like, that's the only way
if
that
you
stuff
ever
would
like
work
get to talk to Tom again, please let me know if he has any production materials from behind the scenes of that. I would love to know what the behind the scenes production of making those was.
I don't think he has anything for that one. Tom really didn't have much stuff. Flash Filmworks seems some. I know they found some like production images for Make My Video, like the Marky Mark one specifically. But other than that, I think that's all there is for it.
So kind of going back to like with you, like working with Tom and Flash Filmworks, do you still kind of go off of what they want to release next, or do you kind of envision, or if it even is like this way right now, where you kind of get carte blanche in terms of I want to do this next and this is why, or what's the kind of like how do we pick what you're working on next?
I usually get to pick it. Like, I think the only time I didn't get to pick it was Corpse Killer, only because Flash Filmworks really wanted that one to be the next one. And I mean, I wasn't against it because I knew I was going to do that game eventually. It just happened sooner than I thought, because I thought there was another game that I wanted to do before that one, which is the next one that's coming. But I'm not like mad about it or anything like that.
Okay.
It's whatever.
I mean, they worked
yeah,
really hard on that 3D level. I'd want to get that out to market. I mean, if you imagine sitting on that in 2018, and then you're like, guys, we got to get Ground Zero Texas for like, no, you look at this level. This is not holding up in 2020. This is a 2019 level.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess that's that's kind of it in terms of everything I can kind of ask you. I cannot thank you enough, Tyler, for entertaining me and just kind of delving me into what you've been up to since development and everything like that.
Yeah, no problem.
I guess really, normally when I'm talking to someone, I'll be like, "Oh, where can people find you on social media?" But we kind of went over that already for it. So, what is the
Yeah.
best place if you want people to follow Screaming Villains?
Just go to the Screen Villains Twitter page or the Facebook one. Honestly, I kind of prefer the Facebook one, only because I'm on that one more. Like, I dread the thought of logging into Twitter for some reason. And with Facebook, it's a daily thing because I talk to relatives and so forth. So, I mean,
I appreciate
whatever.
that because I
Yeah,
get
it's like,
I get a lot of flack. My podcast group I've had for over like 7 years, and I think it's like the kind of cool thing to hate on Facebook. And I mean, I get people have their reasons and stuff for it, but it's like I have this group of like over 5,000 people who every day want to talk from like around the world, and I think it'd be like just really like glib of me to be like, oh, this is better for Twitter. Like Twitter,
right.
it has its purpose, but like I feel like for that like being able to be connected and talking to people, it's like I message my girlfriend on Twitter. I mean, I message my girlfriend on Facebook. Like we talk through like there, we like keep in touch with each other's families, like making events. Like it's a lot easier because so many more people are already on there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
besides that,
Yeah, follow me just those two pages, whichever one you prefer.
okay, someone has for whatever reason listened to this over 2 hour long talk. They have never played a single one of your games. They have every platform under the sun though, and they're willing to buy one. What do you recommend they go first and which platform? Corpse Killer, Double Switch, or Night Trap, and why?
Double Switch on PlayStation 4.
Okay, how come?
Double Switch is my favorite one out of all the digital pictures games.
I will say this. I don't know. I forget who the DP is. Is the DP the same as it was on Night Trap?
No.
Okay, whoever the director of photography on was that, I love however all the shots are made of that, because especially just like some of the like close-ups and like the wide angles of like when you set off the traps are just like they have like, whereas like Night Trap feels like you're watching a sitcom like you brought up. There's like It's like I don't even know like how really to compare like the cinematic like filming style they did for Double Switch. It's just it's very like MTV 90s kind of setting.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, I would not have guessed Double Switch, but you know what? This conversation has reminded me I need to go back and commit myself to a perfect Double Switch play.
Yeah, I mean it's different for each game. Like really, like I could suggest Night Trap because the story behind it, and it technically is the first. But then I can say Double Switch because that's my favorite one out of all of them. And then I can even say Corpse Killer too, because Corpse Killer is kind of fun. Like, Corpse Killer was probably my least favorite one out of all of them, like from the original releases. But when I was working on that game, I found myself playing that one more than Double Switch, which was kind of weird.
Okay. It's definitely, I will say, the one aspect where I could kind of be like, okay, the one thing holding back from Corpse Killer being like I think a lot more replayable would be, and I know you had talked about it, trying to get move support, which I know is like super niche, but it's just one of those things of like in games where just something about using them with like a motion controller, it just like is a little bit more like you feel like you're playing like Time Crisis or whatever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was, man, I would love to have two players. I know it would probably break it. Like,
It almost happened.
Really?
Like, yeah, I can cover both of those things. So, move support, what happened with that was I got it work. There is a version of Corpse Killer with move support, but it's not very good because one of the things that was affecting it was performance. Like the crosshair on the screen, or actually not even the crosshair, the PlayStation camera, it would randomly stop tracking the move controller. So that was one problem. And like it wasn't often, but it was enough to where it would get annoying. And then the other problem is that because of how accurate the move controller is with the camera, it is very difficult to aim at the zombies in that game. So like if you're aiming at a zombie and shooting it, if you just move your hand over a millimeter, that crosshair's moving and you're not aiming at that zombie anymore. It's just the enemies weren't really big enough. So that was mainly why I didn't include it in there. It wasn't fun. It honestly made the game more difficult to play. Like I couldn't even get very far into it. And then 2-player mode, I actually had the plan of remember the arcade shooters from the 90s like Operation Wolf and Revolution X?
Yeah. So
I was basically going to use Revolution X as like a major influence, and the plan was I was going to take Corpse Killer and create a more straightforward version of the game that's more linear and eliminate
like an arcade version almost.
Right, an arcade version basically, and it was going to be 2 players, and yeah, I just ran out of time.
Oh man, I don't know why. I know this is the least like original name ever, but I just can't imagine it not being called Corpse Killer of the Dead just to really sing it home.
Right. That's actually why the crosshair in the game's blue, because the plan was player 1 was going to be blue and player 2 red.
Man, all right, wow. Well, I appreciate for the utter wealth of FMV and development knowledge out there. I know you don't want to say whatever the next game you're working on is. We've kind of gone over that for it. If anyone out there is curious, when do you think people might be able to hear about it, or any sort of inkling about what it might be?
It keeps changing. Like, the game's done. It's like fully 100% playable, but the issue right now is getting it to run correctly on PlayStation, because the PlayStation video player, it isn't the greatest, so it's constantly trying to find workarounds to make sure that the game works correctly. So that's pretty much where I'm at with it right now, and then once that's all figured out, then it's ready to go. But I would say within the next 2 months, though.
Oh, okay. That's actually a lot faster than I would kind of guess.
This game's been done for like 2 months now.
With your like relationship with Limited Run, do you ever feel kind of forced, or I guess no, forced isn't really the right word. Do you ever, because I know their schedule has always been like so all over the place and kind of weird, that you kind of need to line up your digital release to when a physical one happens, or do you ever think you'd be comfortable doing a digital first and then a physical later on?
I would be fine with that. I just don't know why it turned out the way it did, because it kind of turned into a situation to where the game goes on sale for them first, then the digital one comes out. But I mean, like, the digital one's still technically available before anyone even gets a physical one. So, I mean, I don't know how it turned out like that, but that's just how it is for whatever reason.
Yeah, you're like one of those weird developers who technically it goes up first, but then always digital is later, but then people will get physical down the line.
Yeah. I mean, like the way people get it in their hands, it's still the same as any other game they release, except the only difference is that you have the option of pre-ordering it now before the digital one's even available.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks again. Also, thank you if anyone actually listened to this whole thing. I hope you enjoyed learning about a almost 2-player mode in AOL email chats as much as I did.
Right.
But man, yeah. I guess I will pretty much say goodbye. And if you have any final words, the floor is all yours, man.
Nothing comes to mind.
Okay.